Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members and officers. Welcome to this planning committee. In the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust fire marshal regulations, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meetings. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I'll explain the running order for this afternoon. After committee members have declared their interest and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you that are here to make a deputation to come forward and sit at the table. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have 6 minutes to express their views and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. After which you will take no further part in the proceedings unless we need to ask a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make comments, and the decision on the application will be made. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed, i.e. filmed, from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room. The recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of those making deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table. Where the microphones are located and the people entering and leave the room and whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record this meeting on the understanding that if neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, may I ask everyone to use the microphones on the desks provided when they are speaking. Thank you. First of all, are there any apologies, members?
Can I give the apologies from Councillor Fleming, who's represented by Standing Deputy Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Germanu is also sent her apologies and is represented by Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you. Now, are there any interests, declaration of interest, members? Yes, Councillor Hugh Mason.
On item concerning item 02, the Shrubbery and Bay Tree Lodge, I have discussed this matter with both the applicant and with one of the objectors. However, I do not consider that that is in any way prejudiced my judgment. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Thank you. So my partner Richard Adair sent in an email commenting about Wimble Park Sports Centre application, but he hasn't expressed a view on it particularly. It's just about a related matter. So I shall abstain on that item.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Item 3, previous minutes, the approval of which are necessary. Pages 7 to 24, members, are there any comments on that? We will adopt those minutes. Thank you. Members, there was a variation on the minutes held on 15th of November that were approved and signed. We've now modified that to include Councillor Germanu in the list of those attending and to remove reference to apologies having been tendered by Councillor Alicia Denny, as in fact she was in attendance deputising for Councillor Jenny Brent. And do you agree now that those minutes can be signed off? Before we move to item 4, the Director of Planning would just like to make a statement. Thank you.
Members, I just want to confirm to you that the item on the Queen's Hotel has been deleted from the agenda this afternoon and explain to you the reasons why that has happened. As you are aware, Portsmouth City Council received an application to vary the two Section 106 agreements relating to the 2008 and the 2010 planning permission for the redevelopment and conversion of the Queen's Hotel. This application was made in December 2016, and after a lengthy assessment, a report was prepared to come to today's committee meeting. The applicant was seeking to suspend the requirement for affordable housing on the site. The officer's recommendation had regard to the district valuer's advice and was seeking a higher level of financial off-site contribution than the developer had submitted in the application. There are a number of questions that have been raised over the last few days, and the applicant has been in discussion with the council. He has taken the view that given the officer's recommendation, the lengthy process that has already taken place to get to today's committee, and some of the queries that have been raised during discussions and briefings, that he has taken the view that he will not ask the council to determine the planning application and has taken the decision to appeal against non-determination. This means that the committee today can't make a decision on the application, and for that reason the report has been withdrawn from today's agenda. The local planning authority will in due course, as officers, report back on this matter to the committee.
And this is not open for debate, members. This is a question to whom?
To you, Chairman, and to the microphone. Yes, it's not a debate issue. It's a clarification, really. So, yeah. So, will the council then make representation to the Bristol-based planning inspector about the issue, as if we were hearing today? And what should people who want to continue with their objections or support do in order to make their to put in the local democratic view?
Members, we're not able to determine anything today. I anticipate that we will bring a report back to you once we have clarification from the inspectorate, the form the appeal will take, and some more details. But in the absence of having any of that information, I'm not really able to confirm what the process will be going forward, whether it's written representations, informal hearing, etc.
That's very kind of you. The question was, I beg your pardon, but perhaps I wasn't clear. The question was, will the council make representations to the planning inspector about its position?
The local planning authority are obliged to make representation to the inspectorate on appeals.
Thank you. I've got three questions, Claire. The first is, I think everybody recognises that the way in which this application has come forward is not the right way, and it should be done better in the future. So that for members of the planning committee to only know that this economic viability assessment was around 1 week ago doesn't give people time to be able to interrogate it well. Where will a report come, and what change to procedures are going to be recommended to make sure that we don't get into this sort of mess again, is first question.
Right. In response to that, and I'm not going to comment on whether we are or aren't in a mess.
We all know we're in a mess.
So in terms of, we have a situation where we had a motion to full council around the issue of viability and how we deal with it as a procedural matter that went to the November meeting. The action from that is for myself as head of planning to take a report to PRED to respond to that motion. The report will come to PRED at the end of February, and obviously it's not for me to discuss today the content of that report, but the motion required the preparation of an SPD. I will be advising PRED on my professional view on whether or not we should be producing an SPD, and make a recommendation around how we deal with, and it's a process matter, how we deal with applications, or in this case it's an application for a variation of existing 106 agreements. And whilst I would normally be able to deal with sort of, if you like, management matters of how we manage the process under delegated powers, because of the motion to full council I need to take a report to PRED to seek authority to look at the matter. So a report will come forward seeking authority to look at the matter and giving my professional view on whether or not we should be proceeding with an SBD. I obviously can't give you any more detail than that because the report is a matter that needs to be considered by PRED rather than in the planning committee today. But that's what will happen next on this matter.
Okay. And my second question is, in the very little time we've had to look at this, and this is an application where a developer is trying to get away without providing social housing, which is an obligation on developers, and they're trying to come back to say, look, we're not making enough profit, we don't need to do this.
Councillor, is this a question or a comment?
No, it's a question. It is an absolute question, and I'd be grateful to be able to ask it. So, the very limited look that we have had as non-professionals seem to indicate that there was between £5 and £10 million of undeclared profit that the developer wasn't talking about. Can we be assured that the City Council will appoint independent private consultants to go through the economic viability assessment and make sure that we put in a robust defence of our Section 106, which is not the case with the current report produced by the District Valuer, who appears to wave a white flag in the face of the developer and let them get away with everything?
There will be a report that will come back relating to the non-determination application, and it will be at that stage, as members, you will be able to make comment and decisions. You are not able this afternoon to make any decisions or make any recommendations as to how we deal with the appeal, because that's not before you this afternoon for consideration. So as I set out in my introduction, there will be a further report, and it is at that point that you will have the opportunity to debate how you wish officers to represent the local planning authority through that appeal process.
Okay, and my final question, I'm disappointed you can't just give us a yes, it'll happen, but I'm really disappointed by that, Claire. But my final question is that yesterday afternoon there was a briefing meeting with Councillor Galloway, Councillor Pitt and myself and yourselves as planners and lawyers. And it was a fairly robust discussion, and I think it finished at 3:30 in the afternoon yesterday. At that time, this application was live. I had a phone call just before 9 o'clock this morning to say the application had been withdrawn. Can I ask what contact was made, if any, with the developer or their agent subsequent to the meeting we had yesterday afternoon by council officers or councillors?
If you want to. In terms of, there have been a confirmation that there is an appeal against non-determination, and it's on that basis that we are withdrawing the report today.
So was that the position at 3:30 yesterday?
No, that wasn't the position, otherwise we would have briefed members at that briefing.
So my question is, between 3:30 yesterday and 9 o'clock this morning, have council officers or councillors been in touch with either the applicant or their agent following the robust discussion we had yesterday?
There have been conversations with the agents in the way there normally is with lots of agents during the life of a planning application.
Councillor Stubbs.
Yeah, thank you. Can the head of planning confirm that the application as was one based to be determined solely on the basis of evidence and not on the basis of opinion, and therefore the fact that this, you know, the councillor, it doesn't fit with Councillor Vernon Jackson's political opinions is irrelevant. And secondly, that I discussed this morning with the case officer about what would happen next, and she indicated that you know, the local authority, that this committee might not necessarily take a decision on this, because again it's a matter of evidence and not opinion, and therefore if this has been looked at afresh by the planning inspectorate, our views might not be relevant. So can you confirm whether this will definitely come back to this committee or whether that's an open question?
It's an open question. I will be reporting back to committee once we know what sort of appeal is taking place and how we will be dealing with it, I will be reporting a factual report. You're right to say that we weren't asking in the report for planning judgments to be made. It is an evidence-based assessment on whether or not two existing 106s should be varied.
Councillor Pitt, I'm going to allow this question because you have been wanting to speak, but this will be the final question on this. We're then going to move on. We've got a very heavy schedule in front of us today. So, Councillor Pitt.
I did indicate earlier, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to something that Councillor Vernon Jackson said. My concern is that the idea of us having, as a planning committee, briefings prior to the planning committee itself is to try and facilitate a smoother process at the meeting by making sure that some of the questions that we want to ask, that evidence can be provided either by officers or the applicant at the meeting. However, I'm not aware that at any point we were made aware that due to the delay in determination, that there was a risk of the applicant going to non-determination, and therefore, in that situation, it could well be the case that due to questions that we were raising in those briefings, that the applicant, having been made aware of them, took that opportunity, and we were not aware that by raising those questions in a briefing that might happen. So I'm slightly concerned, Chair, that had we known in those briefings that questions that we wanted to raise with the applicant and with officers at this meeting could potentially mean that application was immediately withdrawn and referred to the inspectorate, we may not have chosen to ask those questions on that occasion, and I would ask that we're very sure that we don't do a similar thing again, because the applicant has obviously looked at some of the responses to the questions we were putting forward and made that decision. No other conclusion makes any logical sense.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I will call on Councillor Hugh Mason because he was at the original meeting last Friday with three of us. That they explained a lot of this in detail then, and perhaps had everyone turned up at that would have saved having the subsequent meetings. But yes, Councillor Hugh Mason, please.
Thank you. Mrs. Upton-Brown made the comment that there are various ways in which the Planning Inspectorate can handle this. Could she, for our benefit, suggest what ways they could handle it and what is the most likely way they could handle it, and give us some indication of the timescale?
Okay, in terms of what we're looking to handle, and I'm giving my view rather than Pin's view, the case that the inspector is being asked to consider is a factual case. It's of one valuation against another valuation. I suspect the inspectorate may consider that it's something that may be better dealt with by an informal hearing where he can ask questions about those figures rather than it be a written representation. But that is for the inspectorate to look at and decide how they best manage the decision-making process given the nature of the information they're being asked to consider. If it is a informal hearing, then the council would have to put up someone to appear as the expert witness. And whilst you'd normally have a planner as an expert witness, as given that this isn't a planning consideration, it's actually a RICS consideration, then the council would need to consider how they best present their case and who is best qualified and experienced to present and respond to the questions that the inspector might ask for. So without committing a course of action in the absence of knowing what it is we're dealing with, I would suggest it's likely that we'd look to employ an expert in dealing with this sort of matter to represent the council's case. That is entirely within the hands of PINS. We're aware that they've got a heavy caseload, and as members you can see you've got some other cases of non-determination, so you know already from Portsmouth they've got a number of cases. We are also aware that it's quite a delayed process in getting a start date on appeals. So I wouldn't anticipate seeing a start date confirming how PIN's going to deal with this for several weeks.
Going back to the briefing, I'm sorry I wasn't there, but we were with the director at the time trying to find out what was going on a bit. One of the things I'm really concerned about is that information that was given at the briefing on Friday appears to have been completely contradicted by other people in the council, and that the information given to councillors on Friday at that briefing may well not have been accurate. And it's one of the things I think we need to investigate and look at very carefully, because if we're being asked to make decisions on incorrect information, that's a real problem.
Councillor Vernon Jackson, I'm not aware that you're asked to being made decisions on any inaccurate information. As Head of Planning, together with my DM manager, we give planning briefings because the council employ a Head of Planning to give planning advice to the council. We've given the same briefing at both meetings. It may be that different questions have been asked, and obviously as officers, you know, we can't avoid different questions being asked if we're running two separate briefings.
The question was very simple. How many affordable housing units would this amount of money buy? As I understand it, and when I talked to Councillor Mason last night, he said at the briefing that if we'd gone for this deal, it would have bought 20 social housing units. The information I have from other people in the council, it would have bought 2. And that's a huge difference in advice. And I'm really, really worried that difference has appeared.
If I may correct my colleague, I said that on the basis of what I heard on Friday, a large number could have been levered in by the City Council rather than provided by the City Council.
And can I also further confirm that point in terms of if there is advice being given to you as members around issues of affordable housing, then it is the role of the local planning authority to manage and deliver affordable housing in the city. So it may be that other officers in the council may be giving you different advice. I think you need to question who it is you're getting that advice from and under what understanding and authority they have to give that advice.
Right.
The people in charge of providing affordable housing in the city, and I tend to trust them.
Which is the planning authority through the planning system.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to item 4, which is an appeal against non-determination at Brunel House, 42 The Hyde. And planning application is on your agenda. I'll call upon the officer.
So this is an application for appeal against non-determination. Alan will show you the elevations to enable members who perhaps didn't sit on committee when this matter was considered to familiarise themselves with the elevations.
Okay, so the image isn't brilliant, is it? I imagine members, you will be quite familiar with Brunel House, either in the aerial that's there or the OS plan. If I just skip through this, obviously what we've got here is the front elevation facing onto the hard and the elevation drawing for the front of the building. This is the rear of the building, sort of College Street and beyond. This is the sides of the building, and the final image is back as a street view, as a 3D visualization of the intended alterations. Claire, is that what we had in mind?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. So that just confirms to the members what the elevation that was before the committee on the 18th of October looked like. And as members will see in the report, the application was deferred to seek amendments. Those amendments haven't been forthcoming. We now have an appeal against non-determination. and we are asking the committee this afternoon to confirm what decision they would have come to had they been in a position to make a decision on this application. The report sets out what the officer recommendation is, and so you're required to either agree with the officer recommendation or confirm to me what recommendation you would have reached had you been able to make a decision on this application.
Chairman, I'm generally happy with the recommendation we have before us. However, in item 3 of the conditions, the detailed consideration of profiled appearance powder-coated aluminium frames to replacement windows and the coloured infill panels. How will that decision as to whether they are suitable be made, and are there any basic principles that you are applying in making that decision?
In terms of that decision, we will furnish the inspector with a list of suggested conditions to ensure that we achieve the quality that we are looking for should the inspector grant planning permission.
Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, well, the last committee, in my mind, was pretty finely balanced, and I said so. And I said that I wanted to see the site developed, obviously. But I said I found this quite boring in a place where the City Council, under several administrations, has invested a lot of money, and indeed other partners too, into the hard exchange there. It's a place where people arrive from all over the UK and from international destinations at the railway station, which is direct from London, and is a coach interchange. It's a very important location for Portsmouth, and of course it overlooks the historic naval dockyard, and people who are coming to our city. The city's strategy is for weekend destination breaks. If I can remind everybody, we aspire to be a city where people come from mainly Europe, but other places in the world, and that is in the seafront planning master documents and the City Council's planning documents, so it is a very relevant point. And everything that we do in this location, which is very important, is important to the city's future, and its economy in this building just does not come up to scratch. It's dead boring. There's nothing there that relates, apart from the thing that says down in the bottom right-hand corner, something about Brunel House. Anyway, I did see one comment. My colleague here, Steve Pitt, disagreed with me that, or somebody disagreed with me, said there was a little ode to Brunel. It's not a very big one, considering his enormous stature across the world for design and engineering. We got a little thing in the courtyard there. This building would have been an opportunity to say something about Brunel. It doesn't, apart from using his name. There was lots of opportunity to put in elements in this building which made it respect the place that it is in. It doesn't relate well to the place that it is in. And as a councillor, I demand more and better for Portsmouth. And this isn't better, it is more, but it is not better. It is an improvement, but it is not what I expect. And I don't think it's what most people want. So there you are. I would say no. Thank you very much indeed. I'd refuse the application because the visual amenities, it doesn't respect the site, and it doesn't respect the historical site that it is in.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
In many ways, I'd agree with everything that Lee said. I think it's a hideous building, but we all know it's a hideous building. But it's a hideous building that's been left derelict by the owners for decades. And I'm sorry. I think if they're going to be able to improve it and make it less hideous, I'd like to get it demolished, but that's not within our power. So I'm sorry. I would go with the officer recommendation to give conditional permission. I don't think it's great, but it's better than that we've got now, and it'll make that derelict building look slightly less of an eyesore.
But you agree with the officer's recommendation? Thank you. That's okay then, because apparently we were just looking for comments. We're now going to move on to...
Chairman, I think if that what we're looking for, as I understood it here, is we wanted to know, to tell the inspectorate, if the committee agreed with the recommendation that the officers had put. We can't do that on the basis that 2 out of 9 of us have spoken. I think you need to do a vote so that there is something recorded in the minutes so that we're able to tell the planning inspector what the committee thought.
All those in favour of the officer's recommendations, please show. Those against? 3. That's carried. Thank you. Move on to item 6, an appeal against the non-determination at 1 Edmund Road, Southsea. The officer, please, to comment.
Chairman, all 4 of these are exactly the same. There are no representations from anybody about any of these. Would it, because I'm very conscious we've got lots of people waiting here, would it weaken our case with the inspector if we took them all as one? Because it's all the same policy, the same recommendation on the same thing.
I'll take advice.
In terms of your consideration, if you want to consider it en bloc, then it's fine. All we need to achieve this afternoon is a minute to confirm the decision you would have made had you been able to. So if you're happy to do it en bloc, then we can deal with it that way.
Can I propose that we do them en bloc, just so we don't waste any more time?
Right, so we're going to take all the rest en bloc. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Those against? As carried. They're all through.
I got that wrong. I should have been voting against. I realise now.
Well,
Sorry, for. I beg your pardon. Beg your pardon.
Members, we're going to wait delay item 1 because one of the councillors has gone to get some drawings. We're going to go to item 2, which is the Shrubbery and Bay Tree Lodge, 37 Grove Road, Southsea, page 8 on your agenda. Would the officer like to present the case, please? Yeah, my apologies. Can we have Tanya Bastow, please, and Tim Fielder, the applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application has been called into committee as a result of a deputation request by an adjoining occupier of the site. The application decision was deferred from Planning Committee on the 13th of December in order to allow committee members to visit the site. The application site relates to the Shrubbery and Bay Tree Lodge. There are 2 adjoining buildings located at 37 Grove Road South. The application site is located within the own Southsea Conservation Area and also within TPO boundary number 38. This slide shows the front and rear elevations of the application site. It's currently comprised of 2 separate buildings. The Shrubbery is a Grade 2 listed building on the left-hand side, whilst Bay Tree Lodge is a later addition and is not a designated heritage asset. The proposal is to convert these properties to form one single dwelling with a number of internal and external alterations. Both of these alterations both require full plan permission and listed building consent. A single-storey rear extension has been proposed, measuring approximately 4 metres in depth, 4 metres in width and 3.5 metres in height. And other alterations on this elevation include the replacement of windows and doors. To the front, the existing door on Bay Tree Lodge would be replaced with a window to match the existing listed building. And further to this, to the south, the existing terrace would be extended by an additional 1.4 metres. This slide shows the existing and proposed floor plans. An existing 1.5-storey projection would be demolished, whilst a number of internal walls would be removed and reconfigured to improve internal circulation. The single-storey rear extension would extend the existing kitchen to provide an open plan space. This slide highlights the existing and the proposed elevations. The plan demonstrates the extension's relationship with the recipient dwelling, as well as highlighting new windows and doors, and also the extension to the existing terrace. In design terms, the proposed alterations are considered to respect the recipient dwelling and enhance the character and appearance of the Owen South Sea Conservation Area. And further to this, the alterations will be considered to preserve the special architectural and historic interest of the Grade 2 listed building. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the relocation of windows and doors are not considered to represent a significant loss of amenity or privacy. The extension to the external terrace similarly would not create any new privacy or overlooking concerns. In respect of the single-storey rear extension, it is acknowledged that the siting along the common shared boundary with number 27 Wood Path would have some impact. However, its limited height above the existing boundary treatment is not considered to create an undesirable sense of enclosure. On this basis, the recommendation is for conditional permission and conditional consent, respectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, you've got 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. I am the owner of the coach house, and the reason we're not objecting to the overall planning application, we're only objecting to and we're not actually objecting too much to the rear storey extension. What we would ask simply is that it's a slightly wide angle, the picture on the right, because the actual extension takes up will come right up to our wall, which is where we look out. Our house has windows along the front, and it looks out onto the bay tree and the shrubbery. And the proposed extension will occupy half of that rear wall, and it will come right out to the boundary wall. And we believe that this will create a sense of enclosure. Also, given the fact that to the left of the property, the 90% of that wall is occupied by a two-storey extension, and to the right there is nearly a 4-metre high wall, which is the shrubbery's conservatory or kitchen. So what we would ask is to prevent that sense of enclosure that we will inevitably have if they build right up to the boundary wall, is that the permission is given to extend, but that it is set back from our boundary wall. We did ask for a metre, for it to be set back by a metre, but we'd actually settle for a couple of feet or something in that, so that we don't have that sense of enclosure that building right up to our boundary wall has created. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fielder, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee again. Unfortunately, I don't know your views after the site visit of the 8th of January, but let me try to explain why I feel the planning application should be accepted. I've worked with the planning department to submit a reasonable set of plans, amending them twice to reach a point where the planning officer was happy with the submission, and as we've heard, recommended conditional permission and consent. In addition, the application is fully in line with planning policy. You may remember that in the December meeting, comments were made on how well the design maintains and enhances the quality of this important historic Thomas Ellis Owen building. There is, however, as we've heard, one outstanding issue, the building of a rear single-storey extension and the sense of enclosure that this creates. Let me try to address that. It's certainly true that the garden of number 27, as we've seen, is walled in, and there is an existing sense of enclosure, given that the garden is overlooked by the shrubbery in Bay Tree Lodge. However, it's been like that for over 40 years. When the extension to the shrubbery was approved, it was like that when Miss Bester, my neighbour, purchased the property. We can't measure any change in the level of sense of enclosure, but I submit to you that the proposed rear story extension will not materially change that existing sense of enclosure. The height of the existing wall and trellis is approximately 2.3 metres, and the proposed height of the extension of the boundary wall is 2.35 metres. So the extension will project by about 5 centimetres, or in old money, about 2 inches, above the top of the trellis. It will then slope up from there to a height of 3.7 metres, where it meets the existing wall. It will be a finish with natural slate tiles and white rendering, so it will be harmonious with the existing building. Again, the scale and height of this proposed extension, about 5 metres or a couple of inches over the top of the trellis, will not materially change the existing sense of enclosure. Also, it will be built inside the existing party wall, including the projecting piers, which will create a level of separation between the boundary wall and the wall of the proposed extension. In June of last year, the planned rear story extension was acceptable to my neighbour in number 27. I sat down with her in her garden, with her husband, who's a lawyer, and her sister, who is an architect, and took them through my plans in detail. At the time, they said they had no issue whatsoever with the planned rear story extension. Nothing has changed in the design since that time. There was no mention then that this would affect their sense of enclosure. If she, her husband, or her architect sister-in-law were in favour then, in principle, why should they not be in favour now? I should also mention there were aspects of the proposed design which my neighbour was unhappy with, and this has been recognised by considerably reducing the scope of the initial application proposals. My neighbour has now proposed a compromise of stepping back the extension by 1 metre from the existing party wall, but in my view this will also not materially change the existing sense of enclosure for the same reason as I've already stated. In addition, the quality of design is very important, as we wish to enhance the appearance of this historic building. Setting it back by 1 metre would create a level of useless dead land and a very narrow extension that negatively impacts the design, particularly the circulation between the two existing properties. Again, the fact the extension will be built inside the existing boundary wall, including its projecting piers, will create a level of separation that my neighbour is looking for. I'm left asking that if the extension was acceptable to my neighbour back in June and is now acceptable by sending it back 1 metre, or as we've heard, even less than that, is it really that much of an impact to her sense of enclosure? Other points. The appearance of the shrubbery as seen from number 27 Woodpath, in my view, will actually improve with the demolition of an existing ugly 2-storey extension and the rationalisation of existing pipework. There are no light issues caused, given the site's north-south orientation and the height of the surrounding buildings. There are also no new privacy issues created. It could now be argued that this additional extension will have a cumulative effect, given the 2-storey extension that's been mentioned in number 25 Woodpath. But once again, the height and scale of this proposed building is significantly smaller than the extension in number 25, and together with its build using harmonious materials, will not have a significant visual impact. The planning officer has confirmed that. Crucially, his position after his detailed work on this application, and as stated in his report, is the overall scale of the extension and its limited height are not considered to provide an undesirable sense of enclosure. Based on all of the above, I would finally submit there is, on balance, no overwhelming evidence or good reason to deviate from the recommendation of the planning officer, who recommended conditional permission and consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fielder.
Excuse me, Mr. Fielder has mentioned a couple of points which have put me greatly in difficulty, because he's asked why I've changed my mind and that when there's been no change, when in fact a two-storey extension has gone up on my left-hand side, and the removal of a tree which didn't give us a sense of inclusion because it blocked the windows of the Bay Tree Lodge. So that's why we changed our mind. And also because when you presented the plans to us, we were slightly blinded by the fact that you wanted to include a two-storey extension that would have blocked our light as well. So obviously we were taken by that, and we hadn't actually focused so much on the one-storey extension. So something had changed between when you asked me.
Okay,
So I just wanted to point that out, otherwise it seems that I'm slightly erratic.
You disagree with...
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. No, I'm afraid not. You've had your 6.5 minutes. I'm going to move over to the members and open up for questions. And the first one is Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. When we were on the site visit, I did actually discuss with Niall what the estimation was of the setback if we took the piers on the other side of the wall into consideration. Did you actually manage to get a measurement of that?
Yeah, so having spoke to Mr. Fielder's agent, there was a measurement of approximately 15 centimetres, and the outer wall of the extension would be built at that depth of the party wall.
Moving on to comments, members. Councillor Lee Hunt.
I'm going to disagree and agree with both deputations almost at the same time. The last time I saw this, I was quite clear in my view that I wanted to refuse it because of the sense of enclosure reasons. And then we went to see from the Mr. Fielder's side, and I thought, oh, this won't be too bad, you know. And then we went and looked again from Miss Bastow's side, and again I took a different view. And I think that it is a bit extraordinary, isn't it? Because on the one hand, Miss Fielder saying, yeah, this would be all right, and then Mr. Fielder saying, yeah, but I still want to go right up to the boundary wall. So I'm really not getting this application at all, because you know, there could have been some agreement, I think, but people seem to have stuck their heels in. I can't change that, you know, and I'm very aware of the changes that we saw, that the plum tree had come down. We saw the other things that had gone on in the courtyard. And it won't be long before Miss Bastow's space at the back. It's not a very big courtyard. It's an important courtyard because there's not much of a front garden, and there's a very big window there where they live. It won't be long before she's walled up entirely, to quote Mr. Fielder. So it's very clear for me now that, in my view, this would create an increased sense of enclosure through bricks and mortar, and therefore would have an adverse impact on the current residential amenities enjoyed by Ms. Bastow in her house, enjoyment of her home and the enjoyment of her garden. I think she's wrong, though, because I think even if Mr. Fielder says there wouldn't be much difference if he stepped it back a metre and went up, because that's where I agree with him entirely. But overall, looked at it, we've all looked at this in great detail, and for me, the conclusion I've come to is would do exactly that, would increase the sense of enclosure as described. So I move a recommendation to refuse the application on those grounds.
Any other comments, please, from other members? Councillor Hugh Mason.
As I think Ms. Bastow is well aware, I was very opposed to the development of 25 Woodpath, which I think has made this sense of enclosure which he feels much worse, and that is not the fault of Mr. Fielder's application. I believe, however, that we have the balance of probabilities, the situation, in which, on balance, I feel I must agree with Mr. Fielder that he has what seems to me to be an excellent plan for development. The only concern I have is in proposing the officer's recommendation is the removal of the plum tree and the surrounding solely by bricks and mortar. I wonder whether it is possible to protect the canopy and the trees, but the condition 4, I'm not quite sure what it means, and I would like some explanation on it. So can something be put there to replace the plum tree, or to replace a tree at some point, so that we soften the sense of enclosure? If it is possible to soften the sense of enclosure by some form of condition, then I would certainly propose the officer's recommendation.
Can I just make a point of clarification about condition 4? Condition 4 relates to the trees located in the front curtilage in relation to a construction management plan, so that those trees aren't damaged. It has no relation to the removed plum tree in the rear courtyard.
So there is no intention to replace that tree in any shape or form?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Members, on that particular point, I think, whilst I understand where you're coming from with your suggestion, it is someone's back garden. So if some members were thinking, was it sensible to look at a planning condition requiring them to plant a tree in their back garden, I think we'd have to sort of consider the reasonableness of such a condition, given that they can remove a tree at the moment without the need of consent and do what they want in terms of landscaping of their garden, now and in the future.
Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I asked at the last meeting for there to be a site visit. I'm sorry, on whatever day it was, I had flu, therefore I wasn't able to be there, therefore I'm not going to be voting on this because I hadn't been to get the new information. So I shall abstain.
Thank you, Gerald. Councillor Pitt.
It's an interesting one, and in terms of coming to a decision, the site visit was absolutely crucial. What's not necessarily apparent from any of the pictures is the difference in height between the courtyard where the extension is proposed and the courtyard on the other side of the wall. It's quite a big difference, isn't it, in height? But while we were there, I did look at the development that we can see, the new extension that's in the top left picture there, and in the top right picture indeed, that is stepped back slightly from that party wall. And I did have a quick look, and I wasn't an expert in measuring by eye looking over a garden wall. It certainly wasn't a metre or even 2 feet. I would say it was under a foot, or at the very maximum a foot. And I understood from the conversation I had with Ms Bastow that stepping back had helped to alleviate the sense of enclosure on that basis. If that is the case, then we're arguing about the difference between 15 centimetres stepping back for the proposed one-storey extension not being acceptable, but 20 to 30 centimetres on a side extension that's already there being acceptable. And because that seems to me to be really splitting hairs, the fact that it's not sitting on the boundary wall, I had a concern about that, and I think if it was sat right up on the boundary wall, I would be minded to actually vote against the officer's recommendations. But we discussed this on site, and I very specifically asked Niall for that reason to get that measurement for us. And then what we can't see from those pictures is that there are piers on the Bay Tree Lodge shrubbery side of the wall which require the extension to be stepped back slightly from the wall. Now, it's not a large amount, but it is stepped back. It's not right on the boundary wall, and therefore, on balance, I'm going to support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Harris, please.
Sorry about that, Chair. Getting married, changing the name does cause a bit of problems. Just a quick one, actually. I actually agree on Councillor Pitt's points. He's actually taken the words out of my mouth. I'm minded to support the application. It's just a bit of that I picked out of the actual report, providing I understand all members would have read the report. So it's the bit that says, does not considered to provide an undesirable sense of enclosure for the occupants, and the 15 centimetres that we've been arguing about I think is crucial. So I'm minded to support the application, or second it, whoever wants to propose.
Thank you. Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Yeah, I'm conscious that of the various points members have made, they've been detailed ones based on the site visit, and in common with Councillor Vernon Jackson, I also didn't attend the site visit, and I do apologise for that, wasn't able to do so. I think I'm going to agree with Gerald and think this is one to abstain on because I haven't seen the details.
Right, now, do we have proposals? We have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendations, seconded by Councillor Scott, and are you still up first? Second you? Okay. So we have the proposition, and that is to accept the officer's recommendations. Members, those all in favour, please show. Are those against? And those that are abstaining? That is passed. The permission is granted. Thank you. Members, we're now... Shall we stick with the... rather than go back? Okay.
The absent councillor is returned.
Thank you. We'll now go back to the first one we missed, 3 Paynton Avenue. Could we have Miss B. Murphy and R. Birch to the desk, please, and Councillor Sanders, if he'd like to cover up, if he's going to cough all over us.
Chair, can I make a clarification just for process? We did just consider items 2 and 3 on the agenda as a combined item. We didn't need to vote separately on them.
Yeah, no, that's fine, but you've just considered both items and agreed planning and listed building consent.
Thank you.
Unless you tell me otherwise.
Could the officer present the case, please?
Thank you. This is a site that members will be familiar with now. It was last on the agenda in December, where the application was deferred to allow for a member site visit to take place, and that was arranged and held on this last Saturday. So the application relates to number 3 Paynton Avenue, which is semi-detached property shown here on the photographs and outlined here in red on the location plan. The existing property is 2-storey and has a flat roof extension, single-storey flat roof extension to the rear of the property, which is approximately 5.5 metres in depth. And this section of building that you can see here is the side wall of a flat roof extension on the adjoining property, number 1. Sorry, there are copies of floor plans and elevations to give to you. Actually, this isn't very clear. Could you just pass those around? So in terms of the existing floor plans, it's 3-bedroom property, 1 bedroom at the front, 2 properties at the rear, and a side window at first floor level which serves a landing, and the dotted outline here is the roof of the single-storey extension at ground floor level. The application proposes a first floor rear extension, which is shown here in grey. It's 3 metres in depth, so it doesn't come out to the full length of the existing single-storey flat roof extension. It would be pitched roof in design with the ridge height set down below the main ridge height of the house itself. And in terms of additional accommodation, there would be some reconfiguration of the first floor layout to create 4 bedrooms, so 2 new bedrooms in the extension area at the rear and alterations to the bathrooms. The application also proposes a new first floor side-facing window to serve bedroom 2. And just some views of the site. This is the rear of the property as existing, so you have the flat roof extension, and the view across the garden to the neighbouring property number 5, which also has a first floor side facing window, and then a new extension which has been built at the back of the property. Then this is the rear elevation of number 3, and you can see the flat roof extension to the back of number 1 here. And the proposed extension to number 3 would come out to the same depth as the extension to number 1. Again, just views across from the garden of number 3 towards number 5. You can just see the roof there of the extension and side-facing window towards the boundary, and the view towards the rear of number 3 itself. So the extension would sit roughly in this area. It's set in approximately 0.6 of a metre from the side elevation, so on this same building line as the single-storey extension. Just views then the other direction. This is the extension to the rear of number 1, and then the view from the rear of number 1 looking back towards the application site. So the proposed extension would sit in this space here. And members will recall from earlier discussions on the site that their concern has been raised about the impact to the adjacent property, summary number 5, which has had the extension built to the rear of the property. So in the side elevation of the extension, there is a window which is shown here, and through that window you can see the view as existing. So you catch a glimpse of the single-storey extension and the wall of the first floor extension at the rear of number 1. And then this is standing just slightly closer to the window, so you currently see the first floor extension to number 1. This is the rear of number 3, so the proposed extension would effectively infill this space. And then you can see the existing side-facing window, so the proposed window would sit roughly in this position here. And then views from the back of number 5 as well, just to place it in context. So you have the extension here, which has got large bifolding doors in the rear elevation. There's also a lantern serving this new room. And then the view from the garden back towards the rear elevation of number 3. So again, the proposed extension would sit in here, infilling this gap here. So in terms of the recommendation, there's no change to the report that's in the agenda. It's considered to be acceptable in design terms, and while there would obviously be a change in terms of outlook from the neighbouring property, no adverse impacts in terms of loss of amenity to the neighbouring properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Murphy, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Can I just refer back to one of the pictures, because you said that I had a new side window upstairs. I haven't. I've only got a landing window upstairs.
Sorry, my mistake. I was referring to this window.
Ah, that's from the ground floor. That's okay. Right. The property number 3 is actually to the south side of my property, so therefore I do receive currently a vast amount of sunlight, daylight, and I have no sense of enclosure whatsoever at the moment. If this is built, I will be restricted on sunshine, daylight, overshadowing, a sense of enclosure, a change from the view, from the oblique positioned windows at the back of the property into actual forward facing onto my property windows. So I'll have quite a large amount of impact. I would also like it considered that the application was put in by a planning agent on behalf of Justine Bennett, which was the former neighbour, and she actually sold the property on the 15th of the 12th, and so there are new people actually owning that property. I did have some photographs, but I know that most people have actually come round to me, which I'd shown before. The picture at the bottom is the most clear one. To the left-hand side, I won't be looking out and have any sky in that picture anymore. If I'm looking out from that window, I will be looking at a brick wall and a roof. So therefore, the fact that there will be 6 metres of house right in front of me, and the addition, I don't know the height of the roof, yeah, I will be extremely obscured in my view out of that window at the from the left-hand side, if that is allowed. Whilst it was said that it would be, it's 5 metres away, and I know 15 centimetres is not a lot, but it isn't quite 5 metres away from my property. Now, I understand number 1 has a precedence, but they have a small box type extension that's only approximately 3 metres by 2.5 metres that houses a bathroom. Now, I don't mind if that's repeated on this property, because I would accept that as having been something that's already in place, but my main objection is for the size, the location, because it's actually whereas number 1 only affects itself. Number 3 will affect myself and properties along the way. It'll also set a precedence so that my other side neighbour could actually do the same, and then I would be extremely hemmed in. It was pointed out that the oblique windows, now the picture on the left hand side at the bottom actually shows those windows a lot clearer than what I actually can see into them. They have a reveal that is approximately 10 inches, so someone would have to lean out of those windows to be able to actually see into my property. And I know that because I've tried it in my own property. To actually look into my neighbour, I have to actually look outside of my window frame to be able to see in the property. But if I have one on the side elevation, which would be where the bar is on the bottom right hand window, sorry, bottom right hand corner, yeah, I'll have one that's basically forward frontal to my property. I do use my outside space a lot, so it's not only in the enclosure of being in my house, it's the outside space as well that will be affected. There aren't any others in this road that are anything like this. There aren't any other first floor extensions. People have extended their properties and they've built into the roof, which is perfectly acceptable because it wouldn't affect anybody. It's not in keeping with any surrounding properties. The design, because of putting on a roof, might be nice in design terms, but actually makes my problem or the effect on my property a lot worse than if it was a flat roof. So whilst it might look nicer in design terms, it's going to have a greater effect on me and living in the property and the amenities that I currently have. So in summary, I'm objecting, or would like you to take into consideration my objections, that this will have an impact on me for being overbearing, enclosed, a loss of privacy, a loss of amenity, it's out of scale and it's not in keeping with the local area. So therefore, I won't feel the same as I do currently enjoy living in my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Murphy. Councillor Sanders, you have 6 minutes.
Which I hope not to take fully up. Thank you very much indeed, Frank. Apologies for being out of the room just now. I was on the phone to a constituent, believe not talking about planning. And also the reason I asked Joanne to try and do this after 3 o'clock, I know it's entirely in your gift, Frank, to do so, is because I'm currently due to be at a business meeting with Councillor Stagg to help businesses on Tangier Road. But I will go there straight after my speech, if that's okay. Frank, the other reason I wanted it delayed after 3 o'clock is because Councillor Stagg, following the site visit, has also done a series of drawings which show various angles, which she was happy to send round if it had been discussed after 3 o'clock, which essentially support Beverley's case, which is that in winter, which is one of the traditional BRE equinox guidelines, she would be completely in shadow. Because of the relevant angles between the two. One is 15 degrees, which I think is the normal sunlight, and one is 36 degrees, which is her property. However, sadly, I can't do that, so we're just going to have to work on the basis of the site visit, for which I'm very grateful to you, Chair, for being able to agree to. It doesn't always happen, but I think it opened up a few people's minds, and that's one of the reasons why I'm objecting today. Because it wasn't clear to me when I asked for the site visit from the photographs whether we saw there was a problem, but it was very clear, certainly to me, from the site visit, that Beverley's completely right. And that building the extension as outlined will negatively impact on her amenity, especially when viewed from the rear conservatory of her house, as many colleagues came along on Saturday saw. That view alone should fortify you to reject this application. Speaking to Beverly, and just to confirm what she said earlier, she would actually be more acquiescent, I think that's the best way of describing it, of a smaller extension. However, given that the current owners of 3 Painted Avenue are telling her they don't want to pursue any extension at all, and as she's outlined, they are not the applicant, it would seem fair to refuse this application rather than anything else, rather than defer it for a discussion, because certainly I believe you should do that for reasons for which there seem strong planning grounds. I believe that's not 6 minutes, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to questions, I'd like to ask Claire, is there any relevance at all that the planning application is not being put in by the current owners?
In terms of your consideration committee this afternoon of an application, you need to set aside who the applicant might be, their intention at the time of submitting the application, and any change in circumstances that may have occurred during the life of the application. Technically, the council has an application to make a decision on, and you as a planning committee have the application in front of you this afternoon.
Members' question, please. Comments, please. Councillor Hunt.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate, he's gone now. Members who've come in and showed up and they've not been well lately, so well done everybody, including Darren, who works very hard in Baffin's ward, despite some of the peculiar leaflets going out at the moment about what they do and don't do. Anyway, very strange. But I agree with I wasn't at the site visit because I too had the Aussie flu. I'm not aware of meeting any Aussies lately, but there you are. I had it on Saturday, so apologies for not being there. But I have heard all the evidence I need to hear from the deputations that this would create a sense of enclosure and darkness, and it'd be an unneighbourly extension. So therefore, I move against the officer's recommendation. I move that it be refused for the reasons described by the applicant. By the deputations, including Councillor Sanders today.
Councillor Gerald Jackson.
I thought the site visit was enormously helpful. It was really useful to be able to go and see actually from inside somebody's house what the effect is going to be. And it seems to me it was very, very clear that in that main living room from the main windows on the side that you're going to have a thumping great wall right outside that window, where right to the south where you're going to get most of your light from. And I completely agree. This is the sense of enclosure that it would produce seems to be completely unacceptable, and therefore I would second the proposal to refuse planning permission for this application.
Any other comments, members? No. We have one proposal from Councillor Hunt, seconded by Councillor General Vernon Jackson, that we're to refuse this application. That is the only recommendation. So those in favour of that, please show. 5, and those against that recommendation, are we sitting on our hands? And 3 abstentions. That's carried. Refused. We'll move on to item 4, which is 3 Kingsland Close, Portsmouth. Yeah, I know you said, but it's okay, yeah? And if Councillor Potter could come to the table, please. Could the officer present the case, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This item has been brought to committee as a result of a deputation request from a local ward councillor. The application site relates to number 3 Kingsland Close, located to the north of Alloway Avenue in the Paulsgrove ward. The proposal is for a change of use from a Class C3 residential dwelling to a Class C4 HMO. The red circle indicates the properties evaluated in the HMO count, And based on the information detailed in the committee report, of the 32 properties within the 50-metre radius, 1 is considered to be in use as a HMO. If the application is granted, the percentage of HMOs would rise to 6.25%. This slide shows the front and rear elevations of the application site. The property has a small front courtyard with a larger garden to the rear, which will accommodate bin and bicycle storage. And this slide shows the proposed layout of the property over 2 floors. The property will consist of a bedroom, a kitchen and lounge, a bathroom, a ground floor with 4 bedrooms and a shared bathroom then at first floor. The proposed layout of the property exceeds the minimum standards as identified in the newly adopted HMO SPD. These slides just highlight the current internal conditions of the application site, which is undergoing refurbishment. And on the basis of the proposal's policy compliance in respect of the HMO count and adequate size standards to accommodate 5 persons sharing, the recommendation is for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move to have this deferred until the next meeting. Reason being is there's not enough notification at this meeting. On my deputation, I clearly asked to be notified and the residents be notified, or I could have notified the residents, as there are residents that wish to put deputations against this HMO application. So I'm asking that this HMO application be deferred until the next meeting or a meeting that you see fit.
Thank you. Claire.
For the committee, they need to make a decision whether they think it's reasonable to defer the application today so that the residents can come and make deputations to them, or that they feel that they have sufficient understanding of the nature of those deputations to objections to actually make a decision today.
Members, your opinions, please. Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson.
Jim, can I ask through you to Claire, what's the process been in terms of contacting the people who objected to let them know this committee meeting was happening and asking if they wanted to come, and was that any different to any other planning application?
The case officer will just confirm, who the deputies were and what letters went out, but there is nothing that's happened on this application that is different to any other application, and nor has things like the Christmas break changed any of the procedures in any way. So we're dealing with this in the same way. And if the presenting officer can just confirm what letters went out when and who's objected.
As far as I'm aware, there was only 1 formal deputation request, and that was from Councillor Potter. Whilst there were a series of objection comments, I believe the process is to contact the deputy, which Democratic Services have confirmed that has happened.
So sorry, so if somebody objects, and there are 4 objections listed here, and it's coming to committee, does the council normally let people know who've objected that this application is coming to committee so that they can come and speak, or not?
No, we will only, if someone requests a deputation letter, we then inform them of the committee and invite them to attend. The letter we send out initially notifying them of the planning application sets out that procedure. So at the beginning of the process, they know that if they just write in objecting, we will not tell them when it's going to committee, but they can look that up on public access, and we highlight that to them. If they write into us saying they want to make a deputation, then we will contact them and advise them of the committee date and do that through our development management function rather than through Democratic Services. So in this case, it would appear that the people who put in deputations put in representations didn't make a deputation request, and therefore we didn't send them a letter saying it's coming to committee today.
And do we use the word deputation? Because I know when I first became a councillor here, it's a very, very strange word that I had to go and look up. So do we use that word, or do we use things that are more plain English?
I haven't got a letter in front of me, but the deputation thing, and likewise when I joined this council some years ago, deputation wasn't a word that was familiar to me either. We normally talk about public speaking. So the information we give clearly explains to people about public speaking and what it is.
Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned that if we do defer this, that it's just going to come back and we're going to reach the same answer anyway, because I'm actually quite surprised that it's actually come to committee just from reading the paper. So I don't actually believe that would be the right course of action. I think we should deal with it here today.
Councillor Colin Galloway.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that Councillor Potter was informed about this meeting today, about this particular application?
As far as I'm led to believe, that was the case. Obviously, Councillor Potter, no.
Just for the record, I was not notified as requested in the email that I sent.
Did you want to speak, Councillor Lee, mate? You did? Hugh, we're going to have Hugh, yeah, okay.
I'd like it to be confirmed to me that the normal process went through, including placing notices on lampposts in this area, and that we went through the normal processes meticulously as we should do.
There is nothing about this application that differs from the way we deal with any other application. So we will have carried out notifications, and again, the case officer can confirm who was notified. And obviously, we see on the committee report, we received something back because we've got full representation. So there is an awareness within that community that this application is in for the city to consider.
We can therefore assume that they did see it stuck on a lamppost.
Someone must have told them something, yes.
Councillor Lee Hunt.
I can confirm I put it on the lamppost on my way home.
I don't doubt everything everybody said was done, but I don't think that's really the issue. I think that people knew that there was a planning application coming. It's just that the fact that they've not kept up to speed with it, and the portal is not the easiest portal. I don't go to the portal because it's such a darn nuisance to use, quite frankly. I rely on information I get elsewhere. But I can't really see the harm. The City Council, greatest respect to everybody, gets a bit of a bad press and a bit of a kick in, and people sometimes have a bad opinion. I can't see why we can't go the extra mile. Councillor Potter, given the opportunity today, go back to these people and say, yeah, I've won it, I've put it off to the next planning meeting. I completely disagree with Councillor Peter Harris that we have to have it today. I don't see any reason why we have to have it today. If it's going to make 4 people feel a bit better about the council, I'm all for that.
Yeah, no, I'll take that point. I just want to point Councillor Hunt to the beginning of the meeting. What was it? 5 non-determinations. That's one of my reasonings for wanting to hear it today. You know, because it's costing the council money.
Well, greatest respect. I think democracy and how the public feel about the council is worth money.
Right, councillors, we're going to go to a vote on this. Shall we defer this? All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, no, we're going straight to a vote. Yeah, I'd just like to make a point, which is, for me, I mean, there are only 3 policies which have any relevance to HMO applications. One, under some circumstances, is conservation areas. This is not a conservation area. Another is the room sizes, and the room sizes, it's a tick box exercise. Are they over the limit or not? They're all large enough. And then the third policy is the 10% rule, and that is it. And, you know, there is nothing else that would stand up at all on appeal, nothing. So I'm going to propose the officer's recommendations.
Chairman, I think that Councillor Potter has a useful point, and it's something I didn't know, that if people put in an objection or a representation, and it is then going to come to committee, there is no automatic system of letting them know that it is coming to committee. And I think I think it's worth us thinking about that process for the future, and that's been very helpful to hear, to potentially make sure that people do feel more included. But this is now in front of us, and we have to make a decision.
My proposition, just to be clear, my proposition was to defer first, but there's no seconding yet.
So we have a proposal to defer. Is there a seconder? There is. Are there any other proposals? To propose the officer's recommendation is Councillor Stubbs, seconded by Councillor Peter Harris. We have two proposals. All those in favour of deferral, please show. Those against? That proposal's lost. So is it the members that we carry on? Luke's proposal is that we accept the officer's recommendations. All those in favour? 6-3, yep. That's carried. This is agreed.
Chair, I'm quite happy with the outcome of that, but Councillor Potter gave a deputation, and then we didn't really go through questions and comments as we normally would about the application. We just then decided whether we were going to defer it or agree with the officer's recommendations. So we kind of short-circuited the process. I'm happy with the outcome, but it just seemed, I just sat there and thought, what did we just do?
I accept what you're saying. I think after we heard Councillor Luke Stubbs put the three standard things that we weren't, you weren't going to oppose those. Everything was met, wasn't it? The room size, the percentage. Is it if there are any questions, if you want us to go back, but no, you're okay. We're moving on.
Very quickly, could I ask that Councillor Potter's point, which I think is a very important point, that people need to understand the process, be considered, and we have a look at the information which we send out to people who object.
Yeah, members, I'll confirm I will re-examine the letters we're sending out to make sure that they are, to the layperson, clearly explaining what we will do and what's required from them to keep them engaged in progress on the application.
So sorry, I don't think that's the point. I think it's a question of telling the people which committee it's coming to.
Right. So in terms...
Second letter to people who've objected.
Right, in terms of the practicalities of that, then I need to examine the implications for that in terms of cost and resources. If we are telling them in the first letter that they either need to look at the website to find that date, or that we will tell them what the date is if they do a deputation, then to me that's quite clear what we're doing. And
can I suggest?
Sorry, members, I'm using the word deputation with you as a planning committee because you understand those words. The words we're using with the public are different words.
No, Councillor Stubbs.
Yeah, just to say to members, I mean, obviously work is progressing on the for the channel shift programme, which will allow more information to be accessed automatically and through the internet. And I believe, and I'm not certain on this, that one of the things which may be achievable through the planning system is if you register and you register on a council account, you can get an email out of that. So I think that is something that's doable. Obviously, sending vast amounts of letters is a different problem.
But it was just helpful to know what size of problem.
Would you like me, so that we don't, that we sort of close this matter down in this meeting, to do you a briefing note, but as a planning committee, because I don't think this is a planning committee discussion.
That'd be very helpful.
To explain what we do.
And how much it would cost to be able to...
what would be the size of doing it a different way.
Yes, very helpful. And just ping it to us by email. Save the postage.
Thank you.
Members, we're going to move on to item 5, which is 4 Fair Oak Road, Southsea. We need Kimberly Barrett, if she's here, Geoffrey Blaber, Mike Moss and Mr Paul Hayward, please, if they'd like to come to the front. Could the officer give us the...
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This item has been brought to committee as a result of a deputation request from a local ward councillor. The application site relates to number 4 Fair Oak Road, located to the north of Loxway Road on land adjoining the St James's Hospital site. The proposal is for a change of use from a Class C3 residential dwelling to a Class C4 HMO. The red circle indicates the properties evaluated in the HMO count, and based on the information detailed in the committee report, of the 31 properties within the 50-metre radius, none are considered to be in lawful use as a HMO. If the application is granted, the percentage of HMOs would rise to 3.23%, which is below the 10% threshold. This slide shows the front and rear elevations of the application site. The property has a small front courtyard with a larger garden to the rear. Whilst this slide shows the proposed layout of the property over 3 floors. The property would consist of a WC and shared amenity space at ground floor, with bedrooms located on both the first and second floors. The proposed layout of the property exceeds the minimum standards identified in the newly adopted HMO SPD. This slide shows the shared kitchen and amenity facilities. Adequate sanitary facilities have also been provided with showers, basins and toilets. And all the bedrooms have an adequate level of light, ventilation and outlook. On the basis of the proposal's policy compliance in respect of the HMO count and adequate size standards to accommodate 4 persons sharing, the recommendation is for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I've come here to represent Mr and Mrs Queen, who live at number 6 Fair Oak Road. Before I read the statement out that they've sent to me, in my capacity with the community group that I run, I just wanted to make you very aware that in the 2 years, of the 4 years, 2 years, I've been notified a number of times about this property, not just from Mr and Mrs Queen, but from other residents in surrounding roads as well, that there have been ongoing issues and that it has been an unregistered HMO. Now, whether that is true, I don't personally live in that section of Milton, but it is something that I have been made very aware of, and obviously it's been passed to the local councillors. And I just wanted to make you very aware, while I was looking through the application with the councillors and with Mr and Mrs Lim, as well, Mr and Mrs Queen, sorry, I just wanted to say that in the report, when you look at it, there are actually 4 bedrooms listed, but on the drawings it's saying there are 5. Now, that's obviously very inaccurate, and I don't know whether that can be confirmed or what quite is going on there, especially as one of them is showing in the drawings on the ground floor. And just to mention, obviously, the HMO document that you have adopted as a council, it states that single bedrooms must have a minimum gross internal floor area for a single bedroom of 7.52 metres squared. Bedroom 1 on the drawing states that it is 6.46 metres squared. So obviously there's an issue there as well. I'll just read out what Mr Queen sent to me. In the land registry title deed for the properties on the estate within the restricted covenants, it reads, note to use the property for any other purpose than as or incidental to one private resident dwelling, and not to use the property for any trade or business. Mr Queen states that Mr Hayward has unfortunately conducted his ownership of the property contrary to this restrictive covenant, operating as a HMO without licence, and has reasserted for the 2 years of his responsibility for the property that his intentions were to make this his family home. Despite this, the property has a high turnover of residential letting tenants, and the garage space has been privately rented for the storage of motorcycles and vehicles. The property has been operated as a means to maximise rental income rather than being used as one private residential dwelling. Indeed, Mr Hayward is rarely at the property and does not directly experience a nuisance value to himself. Also, he said, Part 5, Item 6, not to do or permit to be done on the property anything which may be or become a nuisance or annoyance to cause damage to the transferor or to the owners, tenants or occupiers of any adjoining or neighbouring property. The significant number of objections made to this, 18 I believe now, highlight that nuisance caused since Mr Hayward obtained the property almost 2 years ago. In the recent months since the application for HMO usage, the property has seen a reduced occupancy, although Mr McQueen regards that this is a means to help secure this HMO licence, which will enable him to revert to maximising rental income. The nuisance value to Mr McQueen, Mrs Queen and the neighbours will be made worse by granting this licence. The report by the City Development Manager states that clarification is sought regarding condition 2 in the report, which states that the permission hereby granted shall be carried out in accordance with the following approved drawings, location plans and floor plans. The floor plans submitted by the applicant refer to 5 bedrooms in total. If this is to be considered an approved drawing, it should be corrected to match within the private sector housing team assessment on the planning portal, which considers this to be a 4-bed property. Such inconsistencies could lead to misuse of the property under the terms of the HMO licence. He's also stated it is unclear how condition-free for the provision of storage facilities for 4 bicycles can be met by the applicant whilst maintaining the rental of the garage. Building regulations.
Kimberly, you're approaching your 4 minutes.
Oh, I'm almost finished, I promise. The property was built in 2003 prior to the introduction of requirements for improved abatement of noise in 2010. These requirements are typically applied in shared accommodation such as flats, but were not applied at the time of the building of these properties. The granting of a HMO licence for multiple occupation should consider the requirement to improve noise abatement. Just to close, if a HMO licence is permitted, the landlord for the property should seek to address the multiple cases of disturbance and nuisance created by the change in use and to prevent repeat occurrences. Notwithstanding, the property is wholly unsuitable for the proposed usage and contradicts the restrictive covenants set out in the land registry title deeds. The conduct of the landlord of the property has fallen short of the expectations of neighbours and residents of the estate, and as such the application should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Geoffrey Blaber, please.
I live at number 10 Fair Oak Road. I have accessed the city's planning portal in respect of this HMO licence application and read with interest the myriad objections posted. I believe that most of the objections relating to parking safety issues and suitability of the property for multiple occupancy are valid and worthy of consideration by the Planning Committee. Albeit the Planning Committee report compiled by your officers indicates that in reference to existing council HMO policies, these concerns would not, under normal circumstances, result in refusal of an HMO licence. However, my main concern regarding this application for a licence is the empirical evidence which seems to suggest that Mr Hayward is not a fit and proper person to hold such a licence. There is little doubt that this property has previously been utilised unlawfully as an HMO, resulting in disturbance and distress to surrounding neighbours, which due to Mr Hayward's remote location in Kent has proved difficult to manage. These antecedents do not bode well for the future, and it is hoped that the committee will seriously consider the suitability of Mr Hayward when reaching a decision in this matter. I am also concerned at the nebulous manner in which Mr Hayward has completed the planning application form and would value some clarity regarding the following points. Mr Hayward has completed section 10 of the application form relating to existing car parking spaces and proposed spaces as not applicable, which indicates Mr Hayward's mindset on the matter but is insufficiently informative to the committee and concerned local residents. Mr Hayward has stated that no additional waste storage is to be provided, but fails to mention the fact that waste bins have historically been located in the small frontal area where they are unsightly and have previously overflowed into the road and into neighbouring gardens. It is salient to mention at this point that the reason for the location of bins at the front of the house is due to the fact that previous and existing tenants are unable to access the road from the rear of the property, as the only point of exit from the rear is via a garage, which Mr Hayward rents independently and which I understand houses a valuable vehicle. The only way in which waste bins could be transported from rear to front for collection would be to transport them through the house, not a satisfactory arrangement. I would also raise other pertinent issues regarding the lack of an exit from the rear of the property. How does Mr Hayward propose to meet the council policy requirement for supplying adequate cycle storage? Clearly, the lack of a rear exit poses a problem difficult to surmount. More importantly, in the event of fire, and should exit through the front door be impassable, will tenant safety be further compromised through an inability to escape from the small terraced rear garden? Finally, previous issues with the poor and seemingly unlawful management of this property indicate the potential for future problems to arise. Whilst I acknowledge that the committee report states that the City Council's private sector housing team can assist should a property not be managed appropriately, and further states that adjunct legislation can be additionally applied to address breaches of policy and law, it is nevertheless unfair and undesirable for concerned local residents to suffer the distress of disturbance and disruption and then have to instigate the stressful procedure of formally complaining to the relevant authorities. These processes have the realistic potential to seriously adversely affect the pleasant and harmonious community spirit which presently exists in the locality. Under these circumstances, I would urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Mike Moss.
Okay. I'm a relative newcomer to the estate, but I am very aware of the strong community feeling in the area. People care about their environment and their neighbours. It is a friendly and peaceful place to live, as intended by its builders. The estate is less than 20 years old, and its spirit was enshrined in the covenants attached to each property. It was built with community and families in mind, and the properties are ill-designed for multiple occupation. With all the associated problems that can often accompany HMOs, I consider that this application is totally inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Paul Hayward, please.
Thank you. Just to put in context, I've heard obviously what everybody has said. I purchased the property in February 16, and it sounds as though a lot of the issues predated my ownership of the property. In fact, I bought the property in February 16, but the former owner of the property continued to reside in that property for quite some time after, because she was buying a property that was a new build, and the new build wasn't complete. She was moving out of the area to the West Country. So I came up to an arrangement with that lady that she could continue to reside in that property for a considerable period thereafter. So when she did move out, which was probably about a year or so ago, I rented the property to a single family. Now this is, to clarify, it was built as a 4-bed property. It could be used as a 5-bed. There's a small bedroom or study room on the ground floor. I don't intend that to be a room, so to clarify, this is a 4-bedroomed property. And that's how it's presented, and that's what I'd like you to think of it as. No bedroom accommodation on the ground floor at all. I rented this property through an agent to a single family, but because of the size of this property, it's a reasonable sized terraced house, and it's not going to be occupied as a rental to a single person or to a small family. The house is too big. The rental that this would command is probably in the region of £1,200 to £1,400 a month. And the only type of people likely to rent that house is a large family. It's going to be an enlarged family, an extended family of probably 4, 5, possibly 6 adults. I rented the property to a family of 4 adults. There was a husband and wife, and there was a daughter and the boyfriend, but they were all adults. And they latterly took in a lodger, so there was 5 people residing in that property. I was not aware of any issues whilst those people were at the property, although I was aware that there was probably 2 or 3 cars that those people had. The current situation with the property is rented to a couple who have 1 car, and a friend of my wife's is staying in the property as a single lady, as she has no vehicle and doesn't drive. So the current occupants in that house are 3 adults. My long-term intention is to live in that property with my wife and our child, and that's why I bought the property. But between buying it and now, my job has changed. I work in London, and I'm unable to relocate or do a different job for probably the foreseeable future. I'm talking the next 1 or 2 years. So what do I do with the property? I bought it, I like it. I've lived in Portsmouth for many years. I'm not actually living in Kent. It's Ashford in Surrey is where I live. So I've spoken to my neighbours. Mike has only just recently moved in. I spoke to the neighbour before that, and I explained what my intentions were, and there were no problems. He moved a couple of months ago to downsize into a smaller property, and I think Mike's been in the property for probably a couple of months, if that. It's a quiet property, there's no children. I also own a considerable number of properties around the UK. I own 15 properties in the Portsmouth area, which I rent as single dwellings to single families. I don't rent to students, and I have no other HMOs whatsoever. I'm an accredited landlord through the Portsmouth Rent It Right scheme. I'm a member of the Residential Landlord Association. I'm also a member of the National Landlord Association. I'm a professional property investor, and I take my responsibility seriously. I go to the property regularly, at least once a month, and I check on what the condition of the property is, and this is a good quality house. It's not an HMO where there's a mattress in every corner and bunk beds in every room. That's not what this is about. This is going to be my future family home to live in. I don't want to maximise the income. I'm purely wanting to rent out 2 or 3 rooms in here so the property pays for itself while I'm absent from it. The alternative, just to mention that, if this property, if the licence is declined, and I hope it isn't, I believe it's the right thing, because I'm somebody that wants to be mindful of neighbours. I think it's far better that this is rented to 2 or 3 people, albeit unrelated, where I can go to the property whenever I wish, I can stay in the property whenever I wish, and if anybody in there misbehaves, there's social issues, I can ask those people to move. The alternative is to rent this to probably an extended family that, as I say, could have 5 or 6 people. I don't require a licence for that. I could rent it as a large family house, and there could be 5 or 6 vehicles down the road. I don't want to see that, and that's why I'm proposing that I go down this route. So I hope, council members, that you can see I'm trying to do the right thing here. And this property, it requires a licence. I know the council through the other properties I rent, and I'm not aware I've had any issues whatsoever in the 20-odd years I've rented properties in Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Members' questions, please. Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Just to confirm a couple of things. So one thing which was brought up was this issue about the 5th bedroom or the study. And obviously we've been asked to grant planning consent in accordance with approved plans. So I just want to confirm what exactly is in front of us in terms of is there a 5th room or not.
Okay, so through engagement with the applicant, we understood the study, which was originally marked as a bedroom, was too small. So the plans that you see in front of you here and the ones on your handouts would be the approved plans, and that's for 4 bedrooms.
Thank you. Just a couple of hours just really for the benefit of the deputations, just about what's within scope here and what isn't. So I'd like to ask for a comment on, so we've had, we had covenants, we had sound insulation, and we had, whether we can take, any view on Mr. Hayward, if you like, and I know the answer to all of those, but I'd like to formally ask them.
In terms of covenants, that isn't a planning matter, so it's not for you to consider this afternoon in terms of making up your minds about whether or not planning permission should be granted. Sound installation, again, it may be controlled through building regs, but not through the planning system in this particular application. And in terms of the applicant, again, it's not for you to make a judgment about what you think of the applicant. It's for you to judge the application on its planning merits alone.
So, sorry, I've got a series of questions, Frank. The first is that there has been some discussion about 4 or 5 bedrooms. Can I be absolutely clear that if there is anybody sleeping in that study stroke 5th bedroom on the ground floor, that if planning permission is granted, that would break that planning permission? Is that correct?
Planning permission would be granted. Obviously, C3 or C4 HMO allows 3 to 6 unrelated individuals, but in light of the newly adopted HMO SPD, the study that is too small, an additional occupant in there would be something we would enforce against.
Okay, that's the first thing. I think there's clearly issues that we need to take up with private sector housing in terms of licensing of land, because we have here we can do what we're allowed to do in planning law. There's a different section of what the council does in terms of making sure that landlords behave and do the right things, and that's the private sector housing people and the licensing. And clearly there is work that we need to be doing with them to try to make sure that whether this is granted or not, that whoever is living in there acts in a good neighbourly fashion. And the reason for having licences is to make sure we drive out rubbish landlords, because they're not to anybody's benefit. So that's a piece of work we may need to do. The third thing is I've got a query about the count. So is it possible to go back to that? Now, my concern would be that the bottom south eastern corner of that circle hits Oakdean, and Oakdean is in 2 bits, the health provision and then the hostel next door, and yet you've not registered that as an HMO. Can I ask why not?
As far as we're aware, in terms of the HMO count, Oakdean wasn't included. I think the circle just about clips the footpath there. I don't know if it clips the curtilage of the property itself.
It goes into the property that is owned by the NHS by quite on there, because the access road that you can see there is private property. That's not it's not public land owned by PCC. So it clearly does hit that, and I'd like to know why that's not counted as part of this.
The reason why it hasn't been counted, because it doesn't actually clip the building, so we've not included it as...
If you go and look at other applications where it clips the edge of a garden, we include that in the count. I don't know why you've decided to do something different for this application.
Yeah. Okay. I think the use of Oakdean itself wouldn't be a C3 use. So in terms of what does that mean for your count, it isn't going to be a residential use that we'd use within...
It's a hostel for people. It's where? It's a hostel for people, and that's where they live.
Can we just confirm what the use class of a hostel is, which might help the committee?
Sui generis use.
And then just, Niall, if you'd just like to confirm what that would mean in terms of the count of the number of HMOs versus the number of dwellings.
Okay, so it wouldn't be included in the count.
So you're saying that if something's got a sui generis use, so all these places that have applied for HMOs to be 9, 10, 11 bedrooms, which are the sui generis ones, no longer count when we do counts of HMOs. That's clearly nuts.
Could I suggest, because there's a difference of opinion between the senior planning officer and Niall about what the building is. I thought there was.
No.
So I thought you were
difference of
saying to him
opinion.
that it should be included.
No, we're not debating how we've presented the application in front of you. We're satisfied. I'm asking Niall as a case officer to confirm what he's considered in coming to his recommendation, and we're not in any disagreement with one another. I'm just asking him to help the committee understand.
Well, that's, sorry, but if I'm being thick, but that's still clear as mud to me. Is Oakdean being considered as a HMO for the purpose of this count? And if not, how many units does it represent? Is it, because that's
Okay,
what we need to know.
Yeah, exactly. So for the purposes of the count, we've drawn a circle. Given the large curtilage, it hasn't clipped the building, we haven't included it. If it had, and we can have a discussion about whether it should or shouldn't, it would have been an additional 1 unit within if we'd counted as an HMO.
So the question is, what is the lawful land use of that hostel?
Well, why don't you do it the other way to help your decision making this afternoon? Take it as an HMO. If you add 1 more to the count, what does that do?
Yeah, but that's not, every time, beg your pardon, I'm sorry about this, guys. Every time we do this, and it does or doesn't hit the curtilage, I've seen applications where you have to consider every single, I beg your pardon, every single property within as a separate HMO. Or am I mistaken? But certainly in the past.
I think we've had some debate where we've had curtilages where the radius has hit a garden, where it's hit part of a block of flats. And we've got a situation here where we've got an exceptionally large plot with an exceptionally large drive. And the buildings are well outside that 50-metre radius. So if we take that 50-metre radius back to what are we trying to establish within that 50-metre radius, we've seen that 50-metre radius as the measure of our community, where we're making a decision whether we're getting a mixed and balanced community, is your planning judgment. We've taken a piece of land out and said, eclipse it, the building's outside, but that's still our measure of the community. But ultimately, whether it's in or out, which we could debate for the rest of the afternoon, you've gone from 3.23% to, if it were an extra HMO and we've clipped it, adding 1 more out of your 31 units to make it 32 units, which by my maths would take it to 4 point something percentage. So 6. Okay, your maths
Members,
is probably better than mine.
if I'm reading this correctly, whether it's in or out, it's still under the number we allow. So we'll all accept that, whether it's in or out. Is that right?
Apologies for drilling down on the information a bit further, but if we actually look at the diagram, those properties that are within the 50-metre radius normally are marked up, and that appears to be marked up as if it's been clipped. It's got a blue dot on it.
I'm afraid I can't see the blue dot.
It's the buildings, it's these 2 large buildings on the south eastern corner.
Okay.
See, those of us who are local in Milton would know these things.
Well, you walked through.
So coming back to it then, at the end of the day, this only adds, so we're still under the legal requirement. So is that okay for all the members that were querying whether it's in, out? Thank you. we're still questions, apparently. Councillor Steve Pitt.
Thank you, Frank. The question is regarding the garage, which there's been some questions raised about. And one of the things that we do sometimes consider as a planning committee is where refuse storage is going to be, and also the use of the bike racks that will be required if it's to be an HMO. Could officers comment on what the implications of the garage being separately rented may be if it means that the residents in the proposed HMO can't access the rear garden without taking the bikes through the house, or whether they have to keep the bins at the front? Has any of that got any material relation to this particular application?
Right, 2 points. The first is there's a planning condition requiring them to provide secure and waterproof cycle storage for four bikes. So there's a condition there that they've got to comply with. The second issue is around refuse storage, and we're not requiring them to submit details, but we have to take ourselves back to, it's a single family house, there are bins there. What we're looking at, as we know through lots of appeal decisions, is a C4 HMO is the same as a single dwelling house in terms of impact, so it's the same level of refuge storage. So there's no material change in where we are today, being a single dwelling, to where we are if a permission's granted, and therefore we haven't sought to put a condition on saying you need to provide extra refuge storage.
Okay, thank you, Claire. I thought that's what you were going to say, but I thought since it was raised in the deputation it was important we addressed it. Thank you.
Comments? Councillor Stubbs.
The Oak Dean question is an interesting one, and I don't know, I'd have had that down as C1 for institutional living, but whether it is or not doesn't actually change the numbers on this one. And I go back to what I said on the previous application, that I fully appreciate the point that it's not always welcome when houses are converted into HMOs. I had a flat 2 beneath mine converted into an HMO, or a mixed HMO like this, year or two ago, but that's just that. I mean, it's, you know, from a policy perspective, it was in line. We have actually a very strong policy on HMO concentrations. To my knowledge, it's the strongest one anywhere in the country, the 10% rule. And clearly this is under 10%. We have our room size policy, and we've gone through that, and all of the rooms meet the size standards, and we're not in the conservation area for this application. So I see no reason, no material legal planning reason not to approve it. And for that reason, I move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Gerald Farrar-Jackson.
In many ways, I think Luke is right that if this was in Havant, Fareham or Gosport, you wouldn't have to come to the planning committee to ask for this anyway. It would just happen anyway. It's just Portsmouth. We tend to be we are stricter, and I think that is absolutely right. And we've got to be very careful not to give residents false hope, because if we turn this down now and it goes to the planning inspector, our experience is that if it meets the criteria in the local plan, that it will be given permission by the planning inspector. But I think this case is different because we've been given what appears to be dud information in this report. And for that reason, the county is wrong. Therefore, I'm going to say that this should be deferred until we bring this back with correct information so that we can look at this afresh. So I'm sorry, I'm going to suggest that we defer this.
It may be that there are some minor errors in the report, but I cannot see that any of those minor errors would be of sufficient import that they would change a planning inspector's decision on this property. This property, under any circumstances, meets all the criteria which we have set down for an HMO. The matter of the restricted covenant and the fit and proper landlord, these are civil matters and were not for us to decide. Oak Dean, I would agree with Councillor Stubbs. I believe it is a C1 property, but even if it were considered to be a single property in multiple occupation. It would not change the balance. It is still below 10%. So I would second the proposition.
Members, we have... You can confirm.
So if I just confirm to the members, Oak Dean is a C1 use, so it is outside the count.
Members, we've got one proposition that was proposed and seconded. You're going to second, okay, and a second proposition that was proposed and seconded. We'll have to take them in order, and the first one, I believe, was Councillor Luke Stubbs, seconded by Councillor Hugh Mason, and that was to agree to the officer's recommendation. All those in agreement, please raise their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 5, yeah, 2. Those against? 2. Second recommendation from it falls, but okay then. 4 Fair Oak Road is granted. We now move on, members, to 18 Bramble Road, and I ask Mr. Anthony Lane, if he's here, to come to the table, please. The officer, carry on. Members, if you are ready, we'll continue. So if the officer can present the case for 18 Bramble Road, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application has been brought to committee as a result of a standing call-in request for all sui generis HMO planning applications. The application site relates to number 18 Bramble Road, located to the east of Fawcett Road in the central South Sea ward. The proposal is for a change of use from a Class C4 HMO to a 7-person sui generis HMO. The property already has a lawful use as a Class C4 HMO, which allows the occupation of 3 to 6 unrelated individuals. The red circle indicates the properties evaluated in the HMO count. Based on the information detailed in the committee report, of the 60 properties within a 50-metre radius of the application site, 8 properties, inclusive of the application site, are considered to be in use as HMOs. As the current density stands at 13.3%, it is therefore considered that the community is already imbalanced and the intensification of the existing use would further unbalance the community. The above images show the front and rear elevations of the application site. The property fronts directly onto the back edge of the footpath and has a larger garden to the rear. This slide shows how the property would be laid out over 3 floors. All of the proposed rooms meet the respective requirements in terms of the newly adopted HMO SPD and also licensing requirements. These pictures just highlight the current internal conditions of the property. It's undergoing extensive refurbishment work. Whilst the property is considered to provide a suitable level of accommodation in respect of planning and licensing requirements in relation to room sizes, the proposed change of use would fail to support a mixed and balanced community. The proposal is therefore contrary to PCS 20 and the HMO SPD, and the recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. As we've got no representations, it's over straight to the members for questions, and Gerald first.
I'm just trying to check, Niall. On the very helpful piece of paper for Fair Oak Road, it says for 7 to 10 people there should be one wash hand basin in each bedroom. Can you confirm that this is happening in this case or not?
Wash hand basins haven't been confirmed for the bedrooms in this case.
So it would fail the new SPD because it says for 7 to 10 people you need to have one wash hand basin in each sleeping room. Therefore, if they're not providing it, they're failing to meet the standards as required by our new policy, and I'm sure we'd all want to make sure that we stick and support to the new SPD.
Through Claire, I believe that section is potentially getting reviewed, the requirement for wash hand basins, whilst the size standards would remain, the wash hand basin requirement may be removed in later revisions to the document.
Councillor Hughes.
Am I correct in my assumption that bedroom 2 marginally does not meet our size requirements?
Marginally undersized, yeah.
Councillor Lee Hunt.
So the new SPD that's guiding us shows it is about the intensification, for want of a better word, of this particular property that will further imbalance mixed and balanced communities. This is the real reason today why we're going, likely rather, to refuse the application, because it will further imbalance mixed and balanced communities.
Yes, that's what we're recommending to you as a planning committee.
comments or questions?
Questions. So, as following my so Niall is saying that our policy says we insist upon one wash hand basin in each bedroom, but you're reviewing it and you're going to chuck it out. Therefore, we shouldn't take notice of it for this one. Is that right?
What we're recommending to you is that that isn't used as a specific reason for refusal, because we don't think that's in the interest of defending this at an appeal potentially.
Fine. Thank you.
Comments, members?
Thank you, Chair. This is why we had the review of the SPD. The next road along from here, Haywood Road, with the new student development, we're getting phone calls right, left and centre from people saying that they are bringing cars. All the evidence was they're not going to bring cars. They're bringing dozens of cars, and residents are going up and actually asking them if they are. And it's affecting Bramble Road as well. And the principle of mixed and balanced communities does involve reasonable living standards for people. And if we hadn't, as a council, worked together to bring in that SPD, this would continually add to the problem. And in fact, I know a resident spoke to us just this week about this application, and we're absolutely thrilled that finally there's a way of dealing with that. So it's good to see that all the work and effort that went into that is now paying off, and delighted to support the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Peter Harris.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll second that, Steve. I think that's a great idea, and it's good to see the SPD working.
Yes, so yeah, we will continue to have these for the time being. I think until the committee gets its confidence in the policy, it's very interesting and people are learning all the time. It took a long time to get this policy, enormously important policy, and people are pleased for it. One of the issues that comes up around it, besides, I'm not looking to include parking or anything in it, it is the bloody blindingly bleeding obvious. You hear me say later on, is it need residence parking zones. This area did have a residence parking zone. It's one of the issues that residents continue to assail against HMOs, and the council is making a rod for its own back by not having residence parking zones. We saw one.
That's for discussion.
Yeah, I know, but it does.
Elsewhere.
Yeah, I know. But it does impact on policy.
Yeah, accepted, but not
so
now.
I'm very pleased with the policy. Nobody's actually moved the officer recommendation yet.
Yes, they have, yeah.
All right, okay. So I didn't hear those exact words. So I'm very happy to vote to refuse this one. Thank you.
Right, the recommendation proposed by Councillor Steve Pett, seconded by Councillor Scott Peter Harris, was to accept the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. All those in favour, please signify. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We'll now move on to number 19, Powers Court Road. Can we have Mr. Alex Venables, if he's in the room, please, to the table? Thank you. Over to the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Members. This application has again been called into committee as a result of a standing call-in request for all sui generis HMO planning applications. The application site relates to number 19 Powers Court Road, located close to its junction with Kingston Road in the Nelson ward. The proposal is for a change of use from a Class C3 residential dwelling to a 7-bedroom, 7-person sui generis HMO. The red circle indicates the properties evaluated in the HMO count, and based on the information detailed in the committee report, of the 75 properties within a 50-metre radius, none are considered to be in use as a HMO. Therefore, if permission is granted, the percentage of HMOs would rise to 1.33%, which is below the 10% threshold. The above images show the front and rear elevations of the application site. The property has a small courtyard to the front with a larger garden to the rear. And this slide shows how the property would be laid out over 4 floors. All of the proposed bedrooms exceed the minimum standard of 7.5 metres squared. The shared kitchen diner all exceed respective standards as outlined in the newly adopted HMO SPD, and there will be an additional lounge provided at ground floor as well. The proposed facilities are considered to be acceptable in respect of planning and licensing requirements. All bedrooms are of an appropriate size and have an adequate level of light, ventilation and outlook. Adequate sanitary facilities have also been provided throughout the property with showers, basins and toilets. And communal kitchen and dining facilities are provided at lower ground floor level. This space meets all planning and licensing requirements in terms of its size, levels of light and extraction, and in terms of the facilities that would be provided. On the basis of the proposal's policy compliance in respect of the HMO count and adequate size standards to accommodate 7 persons sharing, the recommendation is for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Venables, please. You have 6 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm a part owner of the property in question. We manage all of our own properties through our own specialist HMO lettings agent. We've been members of the PDPLA for numerous years, accredited landlord with the Portsmouth City Council, and we have an excellent working relationship with the council, having never had any issues. In addition, we work closely with the licensing department, and our previous co-living professional accommodation has been described as exceptional. Hopefully you will see from the photos that the property is of the highest quality. We are committed to raising the standard of co-living professional accommodation in Portsmouth. We have gone far above the planning and licensing requirements, as our main focus is offering the best possible experience for our tenants. Some of the aspects of this property which you may not be able to see are: we always have a communal shower which is electric, so if an ensuite or boiler fails, our tenants always have access to a hot shower. We install a commercial plumbing system which ensures all of our tenants can have a hot shower all at the same time for 20 minutes at pressure. We have substantially exceeded the communal space requirements and provided over 44 square metres. There is an upgraded LD2 addressable fire system which exceeds the guidelines for this type of property over this number of floors. We have each bedroom on their own electrical loop, so if they trip their fuse, only their bedroom goes out and not the whole house. We install dedicated laundry systems in each room. We have wash hand basins in the necessary bedrooms. We have a sophisticated notification system where tenants can report issues using an app which alerts us and the relevant contractors straight away. We install superfast broadband across the whole house so all of our tenants can use the internet at the same time without drops in performance. We install humidistat extractor fans which are always on and are triggered by humidity levels, not the light switch, eradicating condensation issues. We've installed sound attenuation in both the walls and floors to protect the welfare of not only the tenants but also the neighbours. We've exceeded the storage requirements in the kitchen, and we have bike storage and additional off-road waste storage will be provided at the front and the rear of the property. With regard to the basement, the natural and artificial light levels, head height, extra extraction and double fire escapes have all been signed off from building control, so we've adhered to and in some cases exceeded the standards required. The basement has been converted using a full tanking system with dual sump pumps and was installed and guaranteed by an experienced basement specialist. The tenants will be of a working professional nature who will be heavily vetted. There will be no students, no pets and no children. I hope you can see that we do not take being a landlord lightly, and this is our full-time vocation. I hope you look favourably on this application, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you. Members, questions, please.
Sorry, Chair, could I just make a quick point of clarification? I forgot to mention in the presentation there is supplementary matters report where the measurements you see in front of you have been updated. So the measurements you'll find in the committee report are slightly different. However, they are accurate and up to date in the SMAP.
Thank you. Councillor Pager-Harris.
Thank you, Chair. It's more so on the second floor bathroom. Can you just confirm that doesn't meet the space standards?
Second floor bathroom is slightly undersized in terms of the space standards. However, through discussions with private sector housing, they believe that given the abundance of bathroom facilities in the property, that this would be acceptable in this case.
Gerald.
Can I ask, since we turned this down last, what changes have been made?
So the applicant has effectively completed the development. There was comments raised in regards to the basement last time. In terms of private sector housing, again, the applicant has satisfied their requirements in terms of levels of natural light, and that's predominantly the main change. Apart from that, the previous application was an 8-person sui generis HMO. This has been reduced to a 7-person, and there has been an additional lounge inserted at ground floor.
So, am I right that the only change is to make what was a bedroom with an ensuite into a lounge with an ensuite?
Lounge with the WC.
Okay, ensuite to it, but anyway. And what has happened in terms of looking at the reasons for turning it down in November? It was around issues of natural light. Can I ask again, what changes are there in this application that are different from the application that we turned down 2 months ago in terms of the reasons for turning it down, which was around natural light?
Okay, again, so the through liaisons with the applicant and the private sector housing team, they've satisfied those requirements, but I understand where you're coming from in terms of it was refused that previous...
I want to know what changes. If the answer is none, then the answer is none. If the answer is yes, there's a bigger window, then there's a material change. I'd just like to know what the difference is.
Okay, well, there has been no increased size of windows or light wells or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. That's very kind.
Councillor Lee Hunt.
Mr. Chairman, I think the applicant wants to say something. I mean, it's up to you whether you let him say something. What?
If you've done something, please say.
So the windows have been replaced. Both the windows that are part of the internal basement, but also the light wells above. So they were old in the previous applications. They were the existing windows. They have been replaced, as well as the light wells above the basement have been replaced. So they were opaque, so they're now clear to allow extra natural light.
Okay. And just following up, muttering from my left, whereabouts are the light wells on the into the basement?
So there are two. So there you go. So that light well there has been replaced, and the light well has been removed. So that is also a fire escape, an additional fire escape.
So is it a glass fire escape, or is it solid?
It's a glass one. It's it's glass. And this has been signed off by building control.
Yeah. Fine. Thank you.
We are still on questions, members. If you've finished, I'm going to go to...
Mr. Chairman, that was the picture that I was looking for. So that's the revised light into the whole of that, what is basically a flat, or what they call them, a cubicle type flat.
That's the lounge. That's the communal living in the basement.
I beg your pardon, the communal living in the basement, yeah. Okay.
Comments, members, please. Lee.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be on. I think, well, that's a communal living area with no light. You know, I'm very sorry. It's a lovely application. It's a communal. It's. I know everything that they're doing is wonderful and it's very nice. There's no question about it. But there's no natural light there. And I'm not understanding why, and I know building regulations say it's okay, it's fine, maybe, but for me as a councillor, I'm saying to myself, there's no real light in there for people who could go in there. The lights could be on all of the time. That's a matter for people who take it up. If they want to live there, I'm sure somebody will live there. But I don't want that standard in the city that I represent. I think they should have proper windows to be able to see out of, and I know they can in their rooms, but that's a communal area, and I'm really uncertain about this now. There's a slight improvement, very, very slight percentage improvement. So I'd be very interested to see what other people say about us expecting young people or whoever to get together in a communal area like that.
Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I did share those concerns with Councillor Hunt, but with the caveat that there is now a lounge, which is not in the basement, which is where you would spend most of your leisure time, one assumes, that is obviously therefore got full-size windows that didn't exist before. What I would like to know, if you'll forgive the question element of this, instead of it just being a comment, is are we very clear, Niall, from private sector housing, that any proposal to remove that ground floor lounge would be turned down in future?
There's nothing specific from private sector housing to that effect, but what is included on the planning conditions is limited to 7 bedrooms, so effectively that lounge wouldn't be able to be converted to an additional bedroom without further planning permission.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
Given that we have a lounge which has as much natural light as could be expected in this area, and given that attempts have been made to improve the amount of natural light which is reaching the basement dining and cooking area, I think that the applicant has gone a very long way to try and meet our conditions. I think he has effectively met our conditions, and so I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Really, I think the points I was going to make have been covered by some of the other speakers. I think this is a pretty good application. I don't know if it's been seconded yet. If it hasn't, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Councillor.
Colleagues, I'd like to take us back to the reasons that we as a committee 2 months ago voted to refuse this, and I shall read them to us. That as a result of the poor layout of the lower ground floor to accommodate shared communal facilities, kitchen, living facilities, failed to provide an adequate standard of living accommodation for future occupiers by virtue of lack of natural light and ventilation, and would represent an over-intensive use of the site. That's what we said 2 months ago, and I absolutely recognise that the applicants have done an extremely high quality job, and it is good. But that doesn't take away from the fact that 2 months ago we said with the window sizes that were there, it didn't provide enough natural light and ventilation. And the window sizes are exactly the same now. They might have changed to clear glass instead of obscure glass, but they're exactly the same. And I don't understand how we could change our opinion that and completely throw out what we decided 2 months ago. It would have been much better if the applicant had come and got planning permission before all the work was done, because then we could have maybe resolved all of this. But we turned this down for lack of light and ventilation to the communal kitchen living area 2 months ago. The window sizes have not changed in that period, and I therefore can see no possible way in which we could change our mind and give planning permission where we're coming to completely the opposite decision on exactly the same evidence.
I'm just going to make an observation, and that is the difference that I think we've been pointed out to is because they've now took away a bedroom and they've provided a very large lounge. Obviously, some of you gentlemen would probably spend more time in the kitchen than I would, but I would probably agree that I would spend time in the lounge.
You do the washing up.
I accept the fact that we've got forced light if necessary, but then there are a lot of houses, and we've all been in them, that have got bathrooms with no windows at all, and they've just got ventilation systems, and some of us spend a lot of time in those places.
Chairman, you can't. The difference between a bathroom and a living area, kitchen living area, is complete, and it's entirely acceptable for people to have bathrooms with no windows. It may not be desirable, but it is acceptable. This is a living area where people will be in for hours at a time. Now,
Councillor, I'm not saying it's acceptable. I just said that was an observation.
Absolutely, but I think it is an incorrect connection, and one that I cannot understand how we would change our mind on the lack of light when nothing has changed. However beautifully they've done this building up.
Okay, we've got two propositions. We've got, I think the first one came from Councillor Stubbs? No? Councillor Mason proposed, and Councillor Stubbs proposed yeah, that's fair enough, coming to that we accept the officer's recommendations. And the second proposal was from Councillor Gerald Vernon-Jackson, seconded by Councillor Hunt.
Can we just go back on the reasons for refusal? Because obviously there is a change in that the kitchen and living facilities aren't now the kitchen and living facilities, they are just a kitchen.
No, they're kitchen and living facilities.
No, because you've got living facilities upstairs. So in terms of what is the reason for refusal?
Do you want me to read it to you?
No, but are we... I can read what...
That as a result of the poor layout of the lower ground floor to accommodate the shared communal facilities, kitchen/dining facilities, if you want to change the word living to dining, fails to provide an adequate standard of living accommodation for future occupiers by virtue of the lack of natural light and ventilation, and would represent an over-intensive use of the site, as stated and voted by the committee in November 2017. So I'm just attempting to make us consistent.
That's your, that's going to be the reason for refusal, and you're putting that forward.
Yep, just to be consistent.
Seconded by Councillor Hunt. One last comment?
Yes, it's not related specifically to the application, other than it does relate to the HMO count in this area. It's unrelated to this application, but I have been liaising with Niall recently over the HMO count further up Powers Court Road. And the numbers of HMOs that we know about in the whole of the PO2 area just beg a belief for reality. You've got pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of HMOs in PO4 and PO5. You get to PO2 and it's a couple of pages across the entire postcode. There is obviously holes there. Private sector housing acknowledge there are holes there. I've got a couple of residents now who've been going around knocking doors, but because it's a 50-metre radius, they've got to go to an adjacent street where they don't know anybody at all and start knocking on doors to come up with the information that we need to be able to make the correct decisions at the planning committee. We need to be more proactive, and I know resources are an issue, but when you go back to a resident and say, you've got to go and knock on all the doors to find out if they are or not and get neighbour feedback, that might be all right in your own road, but going around to an adjacent road and knocking on the doors of people you don't know from Adam is not the easiest thing in the world to expect them to do. And to be fair to him, he's so concerned about that particular application that he's doing that. But if our information on this is so sparse, we definitely need to take some action fairly swiftly to try and bring this database up to scratch. So can't do anything about this one. The information we have is the information, but it's pitifully out of date.
Councillor Pitt, your observations have been noted. We'll now go back to the vote. And as the first proposition came from Councillor Hugh Mason and seconded by Luke Stubbs for acceptance of the officer's recommendations, those in favour please show. And those against? That is carried. Permission granted. Members, we move on to the last item. Wimbledon Park Sports Centre, Tazwell Road. There are no objectors, no supporters, no applicant and no councillors.
Look, I think knowledge is always preferable.
Yeah, we should go and look at it.
Members, as it's on the agenda, do you want a presentation? And
Yes,
then if you
absolutely.
feel that you're not able to make a decision because you're not familiar enough with the
well,
site or the details, you can then look to defer it.
I did specifically ask yesterday at the briefing that we had for a proper layout of the car park, clearly indicating so that might actually happen.
Chairman, even highways, beg your pardon, I don't mean even highways, but highways, the highways report is not ambiguous, it's quite clear, but there's dispute between how many spaces will be lost or maybe not lost. And residents are saying it, and highways have put in a very good report, but is it going to be 3 or is it going to be 10? I want to go and look at the spaces that they say are not marked.
Councillor, if we can go through with the officer's presentation, if the information doesn't come up to what you're expecting, then we can talk about it.
Okay, thank you. I should just draw your attention to the supplementary report. You'll see in there that there has been one additional representation received prior to today, the details of which are set out in the report. And then I received a further email this morning after that had been printed, I'm afraid. So just to update you as to the latest representation, this states that residents residing around the area of the sports centre are concerned to ensure that they are still able to park in the car park, especially overnight when parking on street is at a premium. Most nights there is nowhere else to park for residents getting home in the evenings. I'm aware this is not what the application is concerned with, but the application has caused concerns and residents want to make it clear that they wish to be able to park here without being charged. Please ensure this comment is brought to the attention of the committee and placed on the file. Okay, we'll just move quickly through the presentation. The application relates to Wimbledon Park Sports Centre, which is outlined here in red on the location plan. You have Wimbledon Park Road to the north and Taswell Road to the west and to the south of the site, St Swithin's School, and then Wimbledon Park itself here just lies off to the east of the site. So the building is in the northern half of the site and the car park here in the southern area of the application site. These are just images of the existing building. So the application relates to this section of the frontage here. This is the existing flat roof entrance area and reception area, and there are steps leading up with a sort of raised patio area here leading you to the entrance. And this is the view across the car park to show the rear of the properties in Taswell Road, and then the view across the frontage of the sports centre building and showing you the ramp and the current entrance door into the building. And just some wider views. This is from the park to the east, so looking towards this section of the building, which is the area that would be replaced. As you can see, graffitied at the moment and screened to a degree by the tree coverage within the park. And a closer view of the steps up and the access ramp and the way into the reception area currently. You've got copies of the elevations and floor plans in front of you, so these are just to compare existing and proposed. So current elevation, front elevation, and the proposal is for this flat roof single-storey extension to the front, which would provide a new entrance area with a new ramp leading up to the entrance, and then inside would have a new office reception area and open plan gym facilities, which we'll come on to on the floor plans. In terms of appearance, it's a combination of cladding, so grey and orange metal cladding, and then translucent cladding here in the higher sections, so it would create a sort of light box effect on the front of the building. Then elevations, this is the view to the east, so the side elevation, which would face the rear of the properties in Taswell Road, and the view then from the park, so you would see this as the new entrance area at the front of the building. In terms of the floor plans, then this is the current arrangement, so you come in up the steps here, across the patio area and into the reception in this part of the building. So there's an increase overall in terms of floor space. The proposed extension would build out over a section of the car park, which again we'll come on to in a moment. So steps up, new ramped facilities into an entrance with a reception area and then open plan gym facilities here. So that the majority of the building, the sports hall, etc. remains unchanged. The existing site layout, there are 47 formally marked out car parking spaces, so 3 disabled spaces adjacent to the building, and then 44 spaces around the perimeter and 2 rows of parking in the centre, and 2 spaces here adjacent to the entrance. The car park is unrestricted. There are no restrictions as to how long you can park there or who can park there, so it is just a freely available car park at the moment. The proposed layout changes the configuration slightly, so you've got the grey here, which is the footprint of the proposed extension and the access ramp, and there's a reduction to 44 spaces in total, so just a reduction of 3 disabled spaces remain. Parking is rearranged in this section of the site, additional spaces provided in this section of the site, and 20 covered secure cycle storage spaces are also provided, which are not present on site currently, so 10 in this location and 10 here in this corner. You'll see from the report that in terms of design it's considered to be acceptable. It's an attractive and innovative addition to the building which will help to raise the profile of the building itself. In terms of highways, there have been a number of objections from residents and also a highway officer about the impact of the loss of parking. There is a loss of 3 spaces. There is no specified parking level of provision in the parking SPD. It's on a site-by-site basis, and the transport note that's been submitted by the applicant demonstrates that in terms of gym usage there is sufficient parking on site to cater for the increased capacity, and when weighed against the wider public benefits of improved leisure and recreational facilities, that benefit outweighs the loss of the 3 parking spaces on site. So the recommendation is for approval as set out in the agenda.
Thank you. We go straight to questions, members, and Jonah Vernon-Jackson.
And it's the thing I want to know about doing a site visit, and people may be able to say, is the new car parking spaces at the bottom right corner that are being proposed. Those down. Those ones I'm happy. Yeah, that's right. Yep. My understanding is that they may not be marked out currently as formal bays, but people park there anyway. Therefore, they may, in legalistic terms, mean they're additional car parking bays, but in reality they're not. And I'm just wanting to check with a site visit to see if that is true or not. You may well be able to. You may well have a copy of Google Earth that you can flash up on the screen. Because my impression is that people park there not in formal bays, in which case the loss of car parking is greater than that stated in the report.
Chair, hopefully I'll be able to help you with that. There are a row of illuminated bollards around that corner that prevent parking in that area at the moment, that would be removed as part of the scheme. So those are truly additional bays, unless people have got narrow cars and they're squeezing between the bollards at the moment, which they could be.
Many of us diet.
That's how I'm quite happy to support Councillor Vernon-Jackson if he wants to do a site visit. I think it might be interest of this development to do it right.
It's the only thing I've got to worry about. The rest of it looks fine. It's just about the loss of car parking spaces.
I can show you the image if it's helpful.
Well, no, I'm quite happy to take your word for it. So, Scott, I'm reassured.
Happy?
Yes. Well, I'm reassured, but others may not be. I'm just a simple soul.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second the proposal from Councillor Peter Harris about a site visit. I think it'd be a good thing to do. Not least so people get used to the site anyway, but I think it's really important that we go there because the loss of car parking in this particular, or potential loss of car parking in this particular area, big consideration for people around there. I think we need to get a handle on the site.
Back to Peter Harris. Did you actually propose that, or were you going to second it if...
I actually was going to second it if Councillor Vernon-Jackson was happy, but his queries were satisfied.
So the removal of the bollards, there would be parking spaces?
I mean, I think it's perfectly a reasonable application. I mean, as long as Councillor Vernon-Jackson's happy, he doesn't feel we need a site visit. I'm quite familiar with the site anyway. So I'm quite happy to proceed I'm quite happy to propose the officer's recommendation as it is, now that he's satisfied on that issue.
Well, I go back to Councillor Steve Pitt, please.
Thanks, Chair. It wasn't just about the reduction in car parking spaces that concerns were raised, though, was it? It was about the increase or the improvement to the facilities on the site, increasing the amount of traffic and footfall to the site, which could mean that more of the on-site car parking spaces are being used by centre users, which would increase parking pressure on adjacent streets. Is that correct?
It is, in that residents have expressed concern that they wouldn't be able to use the car park if the extension went ahead. The transport note that we were provided does reflect the increase in floor space, so the level of usage of those spaces has been factored up, and it still demonstrates that there is capacity for the increased level of usage on the building. And the other point just to bear in mind is that while the car park is unrestricted at the moment, it doesn't need planning permission for restrictions to be placed on that, so that could be restricted to gym users at any point in time, so that knock-on implication could happen anyway, irrespective of this application.
And that's where I have real concerns, but could we ask the traffic officer who's actually with us for any further comment on that?
My perspective of the proposal is we've got a car park at the moment with 48 spaces in it. We've had it surveyed to establish a maximum use of it of 46 spaces. That's what the transport note says. The proposal in itself will generate, it's estimated, an extra between 4 and 6 on average, and up to 10 additional users wanting to park in there. So we're going to end up with a net increase for demand of parking on street of 12 spaces as a result of this. And there isn't space on street to accommodate that. Now, to offset that, we need to recognise that this isn't a public car park at the moment, it's a private car park. It doesn't need to be made available to residents, and if the applicant decided he was going to close the car park to residents tomorrow, he could, and if the application came forward on the basis that residents weren't allowed to use it, we wouldn't have any grounds to resist it because it's got enough capacity to meet his own need. So that's the horns of the dilemma. The applicant is saying, my understanding is the applicant is saying he's not proposing to exclude residents from it, but that will consequently mean we've got potentially 10 gym users trying to park on street. If the applicant does exclude residents from it, we can't resist the application, I don't think, on highways grounds, but it does mean that all the residents that park in there at the moment are displaced to try and park on street. So you're in the horns of a horrible dilemma, really.
Can I ask for a clarification on part of what you just said? In terms of the applicant, well, the current operators, BH Live, being able to decide whether or not it's a car park that's usable by the public, is that something that's new to BH Live as the operator, or has that always been the case for that car park, whoever operated it?
My understanding is it's always been the case. It's never been a public car park, but I don't know that.
Anyone else able to clarify that?
Yes.
So this is cultural land. This is land that's owned by the City Council. It's in the purview of the cultural portfolio holder. It is.
Yeah, it's been leased to
But
BH.
it may well have been, but they don't get to lease it or close it off unless the City Council agrees. So we are the owners of that land. If we say we don't want it shut off, then they can't shut it off. The only people who can shut that car park off, depending upon what the contract and the lease says, is ourselves. So depending on the contract and the lease, and I'd be amazed if the City Council had given the land over to BH Live.
Members, I know this is City Council land, and it always quite difficult for the council to look at schemes relating to its own land, but you have to look at it on its planning merits. And the planning situation is it's a car park connected with a sports provision use, and you've got to look at it in terms of it's there for that use and what are the planning implications for extending it in terms of the parking demand and its impact on the additional demand generated by the additional footprint alone, and not look at it about as whether it sits within a particular portfolio of the City Council, what we may or may not be able to do as a leaseholder.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
I suppose I ought to declare an interest as someone who has parked in parking space 34A on at least 2 occasions whilst the pantomime has been on. I think the residents' concern is one which might be met if we can say that this parking area shall be available to all people, come what may, you know, all comers. Because the time when people really do require, local people really do require this car park, is after the peak hours for the sports centre. Now, it may be that BH Live, in their wisdom, are thinking to extend the hours of the sports centre, but usually people who need to park here are coming back mid-evening, late evening, after the sports centre has closed. If we can get an assurance that the parking will be available as it is now, then I think we're in a different position than if we are faced with the possibility that this will become a private, completely private car park and entrance only to users of the sports centre.
Councillor Luke Stubbs.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all well aware that the parking situation is very, very tight in the locality, and I certainly wouldn't dissent at all from the concern at possible loss of spaces. Although, equally, when there was talk a little earlier about a site visit, I mean, we've got it all here on the piece of paper. So, you know, if you think you can squeeze in more spaces, then where? We've also got in the audience here, I'm conscious that David Evans is here, and I think a representative from BH Live. I just wondered if it might be helpful. I don't know if they wish to say anything, but there's been a lot of things said about how the site might operate. It seems that maybe their input would be useful.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. At the moment, having heard the information that's saying that BH Live could just shut this at any point to residents, I am therefore left between deciding to ask for a site visit to understand more, but if they're here that might be helpful, or voting against allowing it, and therefore and following the objection by the highways officer. But if we could hear from BH Live about whether their lease does give them the power to shut this, and from David Evans about how that on earth happened, that would be very useful to know.
Gentlemen, if you could come and clarify these couple of points, I'd be much obliged.
Are we in comments at the moment or questions?
Questions.
Great.
Your question was?
Does the lease allow BH Live to stop local residents using that car park as a free access car park?
Do they intend to do so?
Well, first let's start at the legal position, Hugh, and then move on to intention afterwards.
And this is only going to be 1 or 2 clarification questions. It's not an inquest. This is not a public accounts committee.
The lease, in terms of the car park and the demise of the facility, it hasn't changed at all since 1994, pre-1994. So it hasn't changed. So if that's the case, it's always been the case. But the agreement with BH Live is a partnership agreement, and they would not, without approval from the Cabinet Member of Culture, Leisure and Sport, consider doing that. And it's most unlikely that the Cabinet Member would approve that.
Well, okay, that's asking us to put a lot of faith. I do remember that the previous Cabinet Member for Transport told people in Southsea that if they couldn't find anywhere to park, they should get rid of their cars because he had off-street car parking in the north of the city and didn't care about Southsea. Now, I
believe that this doesn't come under the transport.
No.
This comes under
yes, but
the leisure.
It is asking us to to have faith in the good nature, good sense of a cabinet member, and that sometimes, in some cases, is something that we shouldn't put trust in.
Well, that's for another.
Members, I am going to have to remind you again, you're making a planning decision on its planning merits, not making decisions about how we might operate a car park under a lease agreement. So the planning merits are, you've got a sports centre with a certain number of parking spaces. Your consideration this afternoon is whether you think the extension being proposed is acceptable, and you've been given the planning balance around the potential additional demand generated by the amount of additional floor space against the ability to provide, and whether or not the impact of a slightly smaller than required number of spaces is something that you will accept because you feel the merits of delivering the development are greater than the impact of it being delivered without those spaces. And that's what you've got to consider this afternoon.
And on that statement is how we're going to proceed.
Chairman, could I ask that BH Live, if they were given undertaking here, that they would keep it as a public access car park?
I personally don't think you can do that.
The gentleman looks as if he was happy to answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but if you're questioning a future cabinet member who might change his mind, how do we know that they will?
No,
So I don't
because
think it's a
the
commitment.
point of this is it's in a lease, and the leasee is here.
I suspect the administration and the cabinet member would be very pleased if they answered that question, because it will mean that I can't go around telling everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Verbal yes or no, are you going to keep the car park?
Mr Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the head of facilities for BH Live. I'm only in a capacity where I can actually listen to your recommendations and take them back to my board, directors and chief executive. So I'm not in any position to give you any confirmation either way.
Right, moving on. I've got a comment from the officer before we go back to questions.
Members, perversely, it's an unusual situation here, but irrespective of how we go forward with this, we end up with an increasing demand for parking on street of 12 vehicles. Now that arises irrespective of whether the car park is available for people to park there or not. Because if it's available for people to park there, then it's the 12 spaces required by the gym users that need to find somewhere to park on the street. And if it isn't, it's the public. Now, the difficulty that we have in terms of determining it is because the car park is, in the context of planning, a private car park and there aren't any public rights to it anyway, if we were to refuse this and turn up at an appeal, the car park's got plenty of capacity to accommodate the needs of the gym, and we won't have much of a leg to stand on. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. The impact will be an extra 12 spaces demanded parking on the street, but it's really difficult to deal with it.
So, because we can't get that assurance, and I don't want to be put in the position of having to vote against this if possible, is not a site visit where the applicants can be there and answer the question in a definitive way the sensible way to go?
Again, I'll come back to Claire, and this is not what we're deciding. Am I missing it, or?
No, you're completely correct, and they could give you all sorts of assurance. It's not relevant to you as a planning committee making a planning decision.
To represent the best interests of local residents.
But as a planning committee, you're asked to make planning decisions based on the planning merits of the case. And as a planning committee, it is your duty to act responsibly, given advice. And you've been given clear advice on this about what you're being asked to consider. And you've also been given clear advice what you can't consider as a planning committee.
Councillor Lee Hunt, and it's still a question.
Thanks for your forbearance on this, but you know, as someone who lives in the area, you know exactly what it's like. So what I'm interested in, what time is the facility going, is open hours are, because we had a question earlier on about, so the need, if it were to be granted planning permission, it is between 4 to 6 cars pressured on street parking spaces, and up to 12. That is a material planning consideration. So the question is, what time does it close? Because Councillor Mason said in the evening, but I've forgotten what time it closes. Is it 10, 11, 12? What's the intended opening hours?
I can just check the details for you. There's no proposal to change the opening hours. So Monday to Friday, it's open 8:30 to 10 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday and bank holidays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Can you just do the weekdays again?
Yeah, weekdays, Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. And the parking survey was undertaken on a typical weekday evening, as that's the latest opening hours. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Councillor Stubbs.
Firstly, just to confirm, when we're talking about 12 spaces, it's actually, it might be 12 spaces at certain times of day, but at the tightest times on the road, which is overnight, which is, you know, the later it gets, the worse it gets, including after 10 o'clock. But you're not actually talking about 12 spaces lost at that time of night.
So the worst time, it's not 12 spaces, it's 12 extra demand, because it's not talking about spaces, it's people arriving. The worst time in the survey found was 9 o'clock in the evening.
Councillor Pett, question?
I did have a second one, which is, I'm not quite clear from this. So we've got a planning application for an extension, which also makes an oblique reference to the car park. Now, if we wanted in any way, I'm not sure it's possible, but if there was an option of, you know, jiggling this around to squeeze an extra space in or such like, would that require another planning application? And the reason I say that is because, and you know, I might be speaking out of turn here with cabinet colleagues, but I would certainly have no problem in, you know, trying to facilitate a meeting with you know, members here to discuss, you know, whether there's any option for fitting in additional spaces. But if we did that, we would pass this today and did that, will we then need another planning application to reconfigure the car park?
In terms of the configuration of the car park, the land use of the area that's shown laid out for parking is as a car park. So if they chose to put additional parking spaces in, then there wouldn't be a need for a specific planning application. They just need to satisfy themselves that operationally it worked as a car park and they weren't undermining what they were trying to achieve by causing someone not to be able to manoeuvre in that space.
Councillor Pitt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the, I can't actually bring it up on my phone because it won't let me, but on the objection comments, one of the objectors actually drilled down very specifically, naming each parking space and areas where they identify that additional spaces, whilst not currently marked out, are actually used. And I did say yesterday at the briefing we had yesterday afternoon, it would be very useful if we could address that particular concern today, because they were alleging a net loss of 10 spaces, and I would like to know officers' comments on that, bearing in mind it's not in the report in that kind of detail, it just says loss of car parking. But the objector was very specific and had gone to the trouble of what would actually happen on a site visit, i.e. we'd look at all the spaces. They've already done it for us. Could we have a look at your comments on that, as to whether or not that is a net loss of 10, or whether you completely dismissed their assertions, because then it would be 10 plus the 12 additional on street, that's 22.
We can point for you on here where the spaces have been identified. The point that we would come back to, though, is that they are not they're not of the size that would be counted as a formal parking space. They're not laid out in that way, so that they are areas of space where people are squeezing cars in, so they're not of the required space for it to be treated as a formal parking space.
But you can park a car.
Well,
So by definition,
somebody
they're a car.
appears to be, yes, but it's whether they are actually usable and safe to park in and you can manoeuvre out of them. Okay, just bear with me. If you refer to page 42 of the report, that's where the list is summarised, so you can just check where we are. So block 17 to 24, which is this here, the residents is stating that cars often, one car will park on the edge next to 17, sorry, I don't know if you can see that, 17 here, and squeeze one on the end next to number 24. They go on to say that there are informal spaces next to 1, can't read them out here. So in this area, 17 again, 28, which is here, 34, which is here, and 24. So the same spaces are being referred to in those locations here, on the end of these 2 columns, and on the end of these 2 columns.
Essentially, they're reporting people parking in the aisles, which they could still do with this revised proposal in any event.
Yes. I think it would be now sensible for me to re-go back to my idea of either a deferral or a site visit, because this is becoming as clear as mud. And it is such a sensitive issue that it's going to, if we get this wrong, people will be really cross. So can I suggest that we kind of put back on my idea that we have a site visit?
Strangely enough, I want to ask a question about the building. My views on the parking are very similar to my colleagues. As someone who sometimes is forced to park there, the membrane roof, is that going to be of a sufficient, solid structure that it will take people walking on it? I have seen the children climbing onto this building, and I think it's a question of safety, although it is obviously far from ideal, the access of people onto this new roof from the alleyway and the hidden corners on the alleyway. It's mainly a question of safety.
The design of the whole building will be done within building regulations anyway, so whatever we're putting up there, it'll be sufficient to make the building waterproof. As for a individual walking across it, I couldn't give you that confidence at the moment, because that's down to how the design goes ahead with the building regulations.
May I ask that you take that to building regulations as a genuine issue, because the alleyway to the north of this has a blind corner, and I have seen children climbing onto this building many times.
Yeah, we're fully aware of the antisocial behaviour around that certain area. We haven't even gone to tender with this building until this gets passed through, so all those issues will be addressed when we go to tender, and whoever the successful bidder is for that, then it'll be addressed with them.
Right, okay.
Members, we seem to be a bit of an impasse here. We've got hundreds of questions about alleged car parking spaces, not car parking spaces. I find it ironic that we're even talking about it as a fitness centre, and here we are providing car park spaces for people to go and get fit. I know this happens across the city, and it doesn't include me. Obviously, when you look at me, I don't go to any of them, but my son drives to a fitness centre. I find it quite amazing. I mean, I would have no parking spaces except for the disabled, obviously, and tell everyone to get a bike. But anyway, that's besides the point. What we have before us, we've got now a recommendation, is it? A proposal that we defer this on the grounds that we've all got to go and look at a car park.
Indeed, and get some answers
from whom? Who do we want there when we're there at the site visit?
A, the operator. B, Highways. And C, the part of the council that owns the lease. So the landlord, the leasee, and highways.
Yeah.
As a planning committee, and you're in danger here of making a decision that could be significantly challenged. As a planning committee, you must go to the site if you feel that you're not able to make a decision today and look at it on its planning merits. That is not to do with any lease arrangement. So your site visit would be with the case officer and a highways officer.
At 9 o'clock at night, which is the highways officer said this, and it's proven.
Well, we can arrange the site visit, that's fine, but you can only go and look at it on its planning merits. You can't ask for the operator and a leaseholder and the rest of it to try and make.
I'm sure if they want to turn up, they'd be very welcome, and it might mean that we'd be able to avoid a long discussion at the next meeting when we come back to it if we could get answers there.
I don't think, and I've read the planning, I think we can get answers from the operators without them being on site, and that we've got to go by our rules and regulations, that when we do a site visit, the people involved are the people that are supposed to be there. I'll now take a last observation from Councillor Luke.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this debate has been outside of the scope of the planning committee. I mean, it's maybe within the scope of the council, but not within the scope of the planning committee. And I think the question really we have in front of us from a planning perspective is this building acceptable? And beyond that, in terms of the parking elements to do with the planning application, I think that if this was a private application, it would be pretty clear that we would be in a position where we would have to approve the application. Now, what I am more than happy to do separately from planning is to, facilitate a meeting with whoever wants to come along to discuss some of these issues. And look, I'm looking at this plan. I could say, well, if we swapped 18, 19 and 20 over with the 3 blue badges, then you might then be able to squeeze an extra space along where the blue badges are. There's only be one, but you might be able to do that, and I'm quite happy from my perspective to have these discussions. Now, I'm conscious that, I'm obviously not cabinet member for culture and leisure, but I think we could facilitate that, and I think, looking at David here, I mean, nothing would happen on the car park for some time anyway, so we could, quite easily have a discussion to see if there's an alternative, to see if we can do anything further about the number of spaces, because it is an important issue. But if this did turn out on the other end to be the optimum layout, if this couldn't be improved on, the question is then, well, should we approve the scheme? Should we approve the permission for the gym? And I think we probably should. So I'm going to propose the officer's recommendation, and completely separately from that, I will make an offer to have a meeting with anyone who wants to come to see if there's anything we can do about the parking.
But that's a very kind offer, but once we've given planning permission, it's a bit late. It's a very helpful and useful meeting to have, but it reinforces the need for a deferral stroke site visit to be able to have that meeting before we come to a decision. Why would you come to a decision and then have a meeting to discuss what we might do and the permutations after we've already made the decision?
Because it's not really a planning decision.
Yeah, but it is connected to it, has been referred to frequently through this report, and it's a very helpful offer, and I think it's very useful, but it'd be much better done if we can put this off for a site visit for a month and come back to it then.
Can I just speak for a moment, if that's okay? Or do you want to?
Yeah. Right. If we are doing a deferral as a planning committee to carry out a planning site visit, we need to have clarity of what it is you are trying to establish in this site visit that is material to you making a decision.
Okay, what I want to see at 9 o'clock in the evening, they say, is are the number of spaces used just the ones that are marked out, or are they ones that are not marked out, so that we can have an understanding of what the loss or the extra pressure on those roads from the extra over-intensive, the use that is going to be made of Wimbledon Park Sports Centre and the extra people coming in and the pressure that's going to give by pushing extra cars onto roads that are already filled up with cars and there isn't anywhere to park. So that's what I want. And I also want to ask other things that you won't allow me to ask, but we'll have to do that in Luke's meeting, where I hope we won't have any planning officers, because then we might have a constructive discussion.
Thank you, Gerald, but as you know, it's my role here to deal with the planning merits and keep you on track as a planning committee.
And to do what we're told to do.
Gerald, I'd like to remind you that some of the remarks could be taken as offensive.
My apologies, but I feel I am being manoeuvred.
No, I'm going to ask Councillor Pitt now if we're still on questions, although
we are. I'm quite happy to ask an actual question. The issue for me around this, I absolutely want this to happen. But we need to make sure that it happens with the minimum impact on-street parking for local residents. So because parking on street implications are they not a material planning consideration? So if we are saying that by granting this application, it will have an impact on street parking in the area of an additional 12 spaces being required, which I believe is what the traffic officer is saying, then that is a material planning consideration. Therefore, reaching an accommodation with the operator about how the car park is laid out in order to reduce that overspill requirement from 12 to a lower number is an entirely practical and pragmatic thing to do, because it lessens the impact of the material consideration we need to give to the extra demand for on-street spaces. Does that make sense?
Peter, would you just like to confirm the position, and then we'll just go back to, if there's a deferral, what are we trying to achieve by the deferral that is within the gift of the planning committee?
I think there's probably 2 points that it's helpful to add. The survey that established there were 46 vehicles parked in there at 9 o'clock one evening counted the number of vehicles. Didn't count the number of parking spaces. There could have been 100 parking spaces. Could have been 30 parking spaces. They'd got 46 vehicles in there. So to that degree, I'm not really sure of the merit in a site visit at 9 o'clock at night just to see there's another 46 vehicles parked in there, which we're already telling you there are. But that's entirely to you. The issue about whether or not the displacing of 12 vehicles on street is a material planning consideration or not is the bit that's interesting. Because there isn't a planning control on that car park limiting its use or requiring that it's available to public, then you shouldn't really be taking that 12 spaces displaced on street into account as a material issue in making this decision, because that car park could be closed to the public tomorrow, in which case the public parking in there at the moment would be parking on the street, or would be trying to park on the street. So whether the car park is open to the public or not is not a material consideration in the determination of the application. You may like it to be open to the public. From a highways perspective, purely from a planning perspective, if it was closed to the public, we couldn't resist the application. If you want it to be open to the public, then it has the impact that it has.
To be 100% clear then, if we were to turn down this application based on the increased impact in off-street parking, the applicant's only choice to get the application through would be to go to the inspector and say, we're going to close that car park to the public, and therefore there is no requirement for us to address any on-street parking issues.
That's exactly right.
Can I ask a question then? So I've made a verbatim note of that, and it is that the car park could be closed to the public tomorrow. So parking on street is not a material consideration in this planning application.
To be clear, the displacement of public parked vehicles
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
I've got-
car park on street cannot be a material planning consideration.
That's fine.
Thanks, Chair. I think we're just going round in circles on this, to be honest. We could have just gone for the site visit earlier, to be honest. It would have made life a lot easier. Yeah, probably could have. I'm minded to support the deferral on a site visit, just so members are happy to actually have a look at the site. And I propose we go to the vote now, because we're going to just go around in circles and circles again.
The proposal is to defer the application to go and carry out a site visit to look at the number of spaces on site and the size of those spaces and the ability to potentially achieve more spaces on that site.
The proposal then to defer for a site visit was proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by, I believe, originally by Peter Harris. All those members that wish to defer this, please raise their hands. Yeah, we'll have a site visit. I will ask those against it, but well, okay then, yeah, so an abstain, yeah. There will be a site. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end, but before we go, our solicitor, Robert Parkin, is leaving. This is his last meeting. He's leaving us. He's been very good. Yes, exactly. And the other thing, of course, is we all wish our former leader of the council a very happy birthday.